to go, they will lose more than their homes. They will die. Then Governor Ron DeSantis rejected a call from VP Harris, claiming it was just a political stunt, as the GOP candidate continues to spread misinformation about the last storm to hit the Southeast. Is anywhere in America safe from the impacts of climate change? And is it time we rethink everything?
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we knew the Patriots were going to be bad. It is a rebuilding season, but we didn't think they were going to be this bad. We'll talk about that with Sports Authority Trenni Casey, plus the proposed NCAA settlement that would allow student athletes to get paid. And later, it's Ask the Mayor with Mayor Michelle Wu. All that ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Hurricane Milton is barreling toward the Florida Gulf Coast. It's a Category 4 storm. Just yesterday, it was a Category 5 hurricane, and at one point, its top sustained winds were 180 miles per hour. NPR's Alejandra Barundo reports a super warm Gulf of Mexico is likely to blame for the storm's power.
On Sunday, Hurricane Milton was a Category 1 storm, but within about 24 hours, it had escalated to a Category 5. Only 6 other storms in history have intensified so dramatically, but that's exactly the kind of storm behavior scientists expect to see more of in a world overheated by climate change, like this one. They're already working on pinpointing the exact human fingerprints on the storm. But one reason for the extremely rapid intensification, the Gulf of Mexico is downright hot for this time of year. Storms feed off warmer than normal ocean water. It gives them more moisture, which means more rain, and more heat, which gives them energy. And climate change made the extremely hot Gulf temperatures as much as 800 times as likely. Alejandra Borunda, NPR News.
The White House says President Biden has postponed his trip to Germany and Angola this week. This is to focus on the response to Hurricane Milton and the ongoing response to Hurricane Helene in the southeastern U.S. There's been a surge of misinformation about federal relief aid for Hurricane Helene. NPR's Stephen Fowler says despite information to the contrary, relief efforts are in full swing.
There are thousands of people on the ground helping with rescue efforts across several states, passing out food, water, supplies, signing people up for the fuller assistance. Emergency response isn't a one-way street, nor a top-down mandate from the feds. I mean, it involves a lot of communication and coordination and planning at every level. So while national Republicans are complaining, state and local Republicans affected are complimentary of the response and focused on the task at hand.
NPR's Stephen Fowler reporting. More than a dozen states are suing TikTok, alleging the company intentionally addicted young people to the video streaming app. As NPR's Bobby Allen reports, the lawsuits are seeking product changes to TikTok that authorities say pose dangers to teens.
States including New York, Louisiana, and Vermont have filed consumer protection lawsuits against TikTok. The attorneys general argue that TikTok uses manipulative features that keep teens hooked on the app to maximize profits. While pinpointing the role social media plays in teen mental health is complicated, the states argue TikTok is worsening body image issues for young people with features like its image-enhancing beauty filters. The state authorities say TikTok has downplayed how the app increases the risk of issues like eating disorders, depression, and anxiety. TikTok, which is used by half of America, has said it has many features to safeguard children, including its Take a Break tool to curb internet addiction. Bobby Allen, NPR News.
This is NPR.
Good morning with the latest from the GBH Newsroom. I'm Craig Lamolt. Massachusetts Attorney General is among the states suing TikTok. As you just heard about on NPR, AG Andrea Campbell announced the lawsuit today and alleges the social media platform has been intentionally designed to be harmful to young users. The lawsuit also says TikTok has deceived the public about its efforts to keep the platform safe. Campbell says TikTok uses coercive design features to hook young people into spending as much time as possible on the platform, despite the company's own research confirming mental and physical harms associated with excessive and compulsive use. The company has not yet responded to GBH's request for comment. The city of Boston isn't quite ready to start using birth control to reduce its rat population. Boston launched a year-long pilot program using birth control pellets in Jamaica Plain to test a less toxic approach to reducing the number of rats in the city. There have been long-standing concerns about using rat poison because it harms owls, hawks, and other animals that prey on rats. Tanya Del Rio, the city's commissioner of inspectional services, provided an update on the pilot program at a city council hearing and says the data data on the pellet's effectiveness is inconclusive, and her department is not ready to embrace the new technology.
We want to be good stewards of taxpayer money, and if it's still in that research and development phase, we don't want to be kind of the people experimenting on it if we've received mixed reports. So we're excited and interested in watching it.
City officials say they're open to expanding the use of the pellets if more evidence comes in that shows it's working. Mostly sunny today, a high in the mid-60s, partly cloudy tonight, temperatures in the upper 40s, and tomorrow looks mostly sunny with a high in the mid-60s. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Eastern Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We have Mayor Michelle Wu, who's going to be with us today from noon to 1 to take our questions and yours. We have a big lineup here, Jim.
Go ahead.
Next Tuesday, the Attorney General, just heard she's going to be suing, TikTok.
I heard that.
Andrea Campbell. She's going to be here between noon and 1 next Tuesday. And next Wednesday, we're going to have the governor, Maura Healey, here from 1 to 2. Plus, we're going to be debating ballot questions each day next week, starting at 11 o'clock.
You prepared for those ballot question debates?
I am not.
Okay, good. I just want to be clear.
But I'm hoping to. Well, I'm prepared for one.
We know which one.
I'm prepared for the MCAS.
Okay, fine.
And I'm also prepared for the state auditor, DeSaglio.
So you're prepared for two?
Yeah, she wants to audit the state legislature.
You're prepared for one side of two ballot questions.
I'm prepared for one side of two ballot questions.
You know, by the way, you left one thing out. We have an astronaut calling in from space live.
Right.
What day is that, Jamie?
Friday.
Wednesday.
Oh, whoops.
Okay,
it's
fine.
Wednesday. Sorry.
Okay, maybe we can do the beginning of the show over. Oh, no, we did it already. It's live. So officials in Florida are warning Hurricane Milton will be the biggest storm there in recent history. Evacuation orders are underway for millions of people in the state's western coast. But some who fled yesterday already report heavy traffic, gas stations out of fuel. Here's the mayor of Tampa, her name is Jane Castor, warning of the impact. She was being interviewed by CNN.
Helene was a wake-up call. This is literally catastrophic. And I can say without any dramatization whatsoever, if you choose to stay in one of those evacuation areas, you're going to die.
Boy, that's sort of chilling. So meanwhile, climate change denier Ron DeSantis sent Vice President Harris's call straight to voicemail, claiming she was only reaching out for a political stunt. But his party, Project 2025, calls the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, quote, harmful to future U.S. prosperity because they do climate research. National politics aside, where do these people go when the evacuation orders come down? And is anywhere in America safe from climate destruction anymore? And as we watch the Southeast prepare for the storm and clean up from the last one, is climate change on your mind here? It is on ours. The lines are open at 877-301-8970. Can I add something to this, if I may?
Yes, you may.
I used to use an adjective to describe Donald Trump, who was president during COVID, as his homicidal behavior, because I am thoroughly convinced of the 1 million people who died in the United States, had he taken this seriously, which he did not until he sped up the vaccine, hundreds of thousands of deaths could be avoided. He's being homicidal again. Let's go down a list of a couple things. Remember, the president has not called the Georgia governor. In fact, the Georgia governor had already said that the president called and was very helpful.
Correct.
He says there's anti-Republican region bias in how FEMA is working in North Carolina, which proved to be untrue. He said the governors have given negative reviews to the response. You know the word the Republican governor, McMaster of South Carolina, used? Superb was what he said about the federal response. And then FEMA is short on cash because the money has been spent on, quote, illegal immigrants, which once again proved not to be true. And the issue with that, in my opinion, is not just the lying, which is what Trump is. The issue is you scare the hell out of people who are already scared. There's not enough money to help. Oh, you know what he also said? He said the maximum benefit, I forgot this, was $750.
Yeah,
In
that's
fact,
another
it's
lie.
not.
No.
$750 is the immediate money you get for essentials. The max is $42,500 to repair your home. So
Excuse
he's
me.
intentionally scaring people who are already being terrorized.
By the way, under Project 2025, which you just mentioned,
Yeah.
they want to decimate FEMA.
I know they do. I know they do.
They want to privatize the weather forecasting. What is it called? The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric
Oceanographic, yeah.
Administration. NOAA is what we usually call it.
Yep.
You know why? Because they say it's building climate hysteria. So if Project 2025, if he wins in Project 2025, although Trump denies he's got nothing to do with it, I mean, the people that work from put it together, things would be really bad. They want to put the weather forecast behind a paywall so that you
And
have
Marjorie Taylor Greene's going to do it behind the paywall.
Well, she
By the
thinks
way,
it's lasers are causing these
did you
hurricanes.
hear the NPR news, or were you preparing? The NPR news said there have been only 6 other storms in history that have intensified as quickly as Milton has. Also, we have this meteorologist. I don't know. I assume most of you heard
yes.
this guy. It's John Morales. He, again, as I say, a meteorologist, getting emotional, talking about how big and destructive Milton is. Here's Morales.
And it's certainly, it's just an incredible hurricane. It has dropped It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific.
And this is in the state of the slimy, climate-denying governor of Florida, who is more concerned about ideology than he is about safeguarding the lives of his
Oh
constituents.
yeah, he wants
Just
climate
disgraceful.
change taken out of state documents and all that kind of stuff, like Scott did, the senator that was there
When he was
before
governor,
him.
yeah.
But there's a couple of things that I have been impressed by. For a change, most of the reports that I've heard about this are talking about human-caused climate change. And the reason that these storms can intensify so fast as they have is because the water temperature, it gets so hot.
In the
It's
Gulf,
above
yeah.
80 degrees in the Gulf.
Oh, yeah.
And it could be a problem for us. So that's encouraging.
Which
But-
we're going to talk to Mayor Wu about, by the way,
we are,
at
and
some depth
what
at
Boston
noon,
can do about that. That is one good thing. So that there seems to be a lot of understanding that this is related to climate change. But the thing that's so upsetting to me about this, and I told you, my dear friend from high school has lost homes down there, and I don't think people realize the water mixes with sewage because the septic tanks overflows. So you have homes with 4 feet of water and mud and sewage, and you're down there in 92-degree heat trying to salvage what you can from your home. But there's a real problem in this election because Donald Trump is a climate change denier. Project 2025, as I said, would do terrible things. You wouldn't be able to get insurance. That he wants to privatize the weather service. He wants to decimate FEMA so they wouldn't be able to give the protection that they can now, and go back to states and localities to pay for all this repair. You see the damage that's done down there.
Did you see the Florida poll today in the New York Times? The average lead for Donald Trump has been 4 points in Florida.
Yep.
The New York Times says he's up by 13 points. He's a climate change denier in a state that is about to be hit by 2 of the most fearsome hurricanes in a period of 2 weeks. So how do you explain that?
I don't know. I think climate change has become a political thing. People don't believe it's true, but it is true. And if the states and these localities had to pay a loan, as Project 2025 wants, for repairs after a disaster like this, they give an example in this story by The Guardian about Hurricane Michael hit a place called Mexico Beach, Florida in 2018. What it cost them to repair the damage done was more than the entire city budget. So in other words, you get rid of FEMA, you leave it to poor towns or even reasonably affluent towns, they can't afford it, and people just lose everything.
877-301-8970. We want to get your reaction to what's going on in Texas, in Florida. We also want to get your reaction to the politics that are being played around survival of individuals' lives and property. And thirdly, how worried are you here? I mean, I will talk to Mayor Wu, as I said. Was it Hurricane Sandy that missed us by a sliver a decade ago?
Had Hurricane Sandy hit Boston the way it hit New York City, we would have been flooded from the Back Bay right up to Kenmore Square, which would be a tragedy because the Back Bay is probably the most beautiful part of Boston, with Boston Common and all those beautiful brownstones. It would have been a total disaster.
But it's coming, is the point.
One more thing I just want to say. That's what I think is so unnerving about this is Florida that's getting hit right now. But what Helene showed is that a hurricane can make landfall in Florida and then go all the way up to North Carolina. People in Asheville, North Carolina, very hip, very beautiful little town, decimated. So it has, again, with climate change, the rains can keep coming and coming and coming and just wipe out these places. So that's one of the things I want to ask people is you have a sense of permanence, I think, about buildings or maybe where you live, the home that was maybe in your family or the library that's been there, the hospital that's been there, all those things. You have a sense of permanence. That has been really impacted by climate, I think, because you just don't know. I mean, who would have thought Montpelier, Vermont could be decimated in the downtown
How about
the way
Fitchburg?
It was? Fitchburg, that's right.
So do you think if Mar-a-Lago was targeted, Donald Trump would be singing a different tune about climate change?
Well, I was reading up on Mar-a-Lago this morning. Ms. Merriweather, who built that back in 1927, was prescient. In some places, the walls are 3 feet
I didn't know that, really?
thick.
Because of this?
I don't know.
Not climate change.
Not because of climate change, but I don't know. But the stone, concrete, steel, it's pretty well fortified, Mar-a-Lago. They are going to get impact, but it's going to be more tropical storm there. Anyway, 877-301-8970 are the numbers. How do you feel, just not about what's going on in Florida, which is tragic, but about the whole idea of this happening to you where you live? Arthur in Marblehead, thank you for calling.
Hello, Arthur.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. This morning, I just really wanted to insert a little factoid, which is scientists have determined that the permafrost in both poles contain pretty much 2 times the amount of carbon dioxide that's in our atmosphere right now. So if that melts because of climate change and all that carbon dioxide equals 200% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that will be the tipping point where the world becomes a pot of boiling water. So, yeah, we got to get on the horse and get this fixed, or toodles. You know, I'm 72 years old, so it probably won't happen in the rest of my life. But the next generation, you guys are going to have to fix this. My last little comment would be that anybody who wants to fact check this, I actually heard it on this radio station about a month ago regarding the carbon dioxide in the permafrost. So,
Arthur, thank you for the call. Can I make a request to callers? By the way, it was excellent, Arthur. There is not a rule on this show that if you're older than 70, you have to give us your birth date.
Well,
I don't quite understand this. What does he think he's going to be gone in a week?
He'll be 6 feet under before the worst of climate change happens. But
I'm not sure that's true.
The sad truth is that if we stop doing everything today, which we're obviously not doing, in terms of polluting the air with power plants and buildings and cars and buses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, things will still get worse the next 30 years. So we are kind of out of time here. And by the way, apparently last night on Fox, according to one of the texters, Sean Hannity said the Biden administration's response to Hurricane Helene has been the worst of history, and he repeated the lie from Trump that the money's being diverted to people who are in the country illegally.
You know, it is really, I repeat, for those who just tuned in, the Republican governor of South Carolina said the response from the federal government was, quote, superb. Governor Kemp of Georgia praised President Biden, who he is not supporting, saying he said, call him directly. The response has been great. Tom Tillis, the senator from North Carolina, said similar sort of things. So this is just made up of whole cloth. You can repeat it as many times you want, whether you're Sean Hannity or not, other than the fact that Congress has got to approve more money for FEMA because of the frequency and intensity of these storms. The federal government has been doing, according to governors, a superb job.
Susan in Boston, thank you for calling.
My God. Hi, Susan.
Oh, hi. It's Susan from Milton.
Hi, Susan. How are you?
I'm good. So my husband and I owned a home in St. Petersburg, Florida from 2006 to 2013. And we moved back to Milton because my parents were getting older, so I wanted to be back up here. And we always debated, should we go back? Should we go back? At the time when we lived there, the state was purple. And now it's red as far as I'm concerned. But my house is probably totally destroyed at this point. My friend lost her home in Snell Island. My cousin lost her home in Madeira Beach. I can't tell you the people that I know, the destruction. And now Milton is heading, no pun intended, but Milton is heading to that area. I feel so bad. But
Milton is heading to what area, Susan?
No, she meant Hurricane Milton, and she's calling
Milton.
from Milton.
I thought you were talking. I'm sorry, I was confused.
No, Hurricane Milton. I'm from Milton. I live in Milton now. Okay. I'm originally from Milton, but I know I still kept my Florida number. But I feel so bad. But, my husband and I debated once my parents had passed, should we move down? But we were like, no, the climate change, we took it very seriously.
Yeah.
And we sold our house. And, Florida isn't really even an option anymore.
Susan, thanks for sharing your experience with us.
There have been a lot of stories about how people can't sell their houses now in Florida because the headline from the Wall Street Journal business newspaper, as you know, the great Florida migration is coming undone, talking about a guy who's been trying to sell his 5-bedroom house for $583,000, which would be a real bargain around here. He can't sell it, and he's probably going to lose money on it.
How about that story in the Globe a few weeks ago? Oh, no, I was going to talk about, was it Nantucket or wherever it was?
Nantucket.
A multi-million-dollar house, which clearly is imminently going to be in the water. What did he pay for it? $600,000, the guy, because he knew.
I think he paid $395,000.
Well, whatever he paid, it was obviously.
And it was over $1 million.
And he knew it's going to go, but he said, I've always wanted to have a house by the water, and it's going to be a house in the water.
But what I was going to mention now is Zillow, more than 80% reports that more than 80% of buyers now consider climate risk when purchasing a home. They're very concerned, obviously, about flooding, but they're also concerned about fires and heat, this unbelievable heat they have had in Arizona, and air quality, too. And one thing, you've probably seen on television these horrible pictures from North Carolina, people up in the mountains there with the mudslides and the roads that went out and the houses floating down the river. The Republican legislature in North Carolina got rid of a lot of regulations on building there so that people would not have to build houses for climate resiliency.
Because they're more expensive.
Because they are more expensive. And the lobbying from the construction business and all those other people that want buildings built not well but fast. And this is what happened. And so they didn't have to necessarily lose their homes, but they did because of, again, I sound partisan, but it is the Republicans that are pretending that climate change is not a problem.
So we had this discussion with one of my favorite political analysts yesterday, Anand Girdidas. So if they care about the economy or something and say they were better off 4 years ago than they are today, it doesn't matter that climate change is an existential threat and their candidate denies it, thinks it's a hoax. Doesn't matter that he tried to overthrow the government of the United States like any good dictator.
You keep going down this same place, Jim. People don't believe that's true.
Well,
they don't
how about
believe
in
that's
Florida?
true.
Wait. He's a 13-point lead in Florida. That poll was taken after Helene hit and after Milton is on its way. What do they watch? What do they? They don't have to believe anything except their own eyes.
It's like one of my neighbors in Brookline told me, weather is weather, the climate changes.
Oh, my God.
In Brookline.
Katie in Rhode Island, you're next on Boston Public Radio, is about to have a stroke here. Hi, Katie. Hello.
I'll help you not have a stroke, Jim.
Thank you.
It's your favorite aggressive cleaner.
Oh, hey, Katie. How are you?
So, hi, guys. So my family's very lucky. We've owned a property in Matunic in southern Rhode Island since the early 1920s. And in all of the major hurricanes, 38, 54, Bob, Gloria, never was there storm damage on our property. And then with Hurricane Ida a few years ago, that was bad in New Jersey, but it wasn't even supposed to affect Rhode Island. We got 9 inches of rain between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m.
Oh, my God.
And for the first time ever, my whole property filled up like a swimming pool, and our basement's a walkout level, so it just all came into the basement. And thank goodness we have flood insurance. We're a few streets from the ocean. Everything was replaced: the furnace, the hot water heater, the washer, and the dryer. But it was shocking to know that my great grandparents owned this property and nothing had ever happened in any of those severe hurricanes, and something that wasn't supposed to affect Rhode Island, out of the blue,
Hey, Katie,
flooded that area.
how much is your flood
Yeah.
insurance? Do you know?
So
It's a lot
4 years
in
ago,
most
we
places.
were paying. 4 years ago, we were paying $920 before we ever had a claim, and then after Ida, we have selective flood insurance.
Mm-hmm.
After Ida, it went up to about $1,200 a year.
Well, that's not bad.
But I was very lucky. I called my insurance adjuster right away. He came out to me first, but he had about 60 claims that he had to process. So because I got the first phone call, we actually got $18,000 in content reimbursement, but we documented everything.
Yeah,
with
that's
a
you're
paper
very
trail and
lucky.
photos.
You're very lucky. I've been talking
Katie,
to friends
thanks.
in Florida. They're talking about flood insurance being $8,000 a year, $10,000 a year.
If you can get it.
If you can get it. And that's the other thing that FEMA does, which Project 2025 would like to get rid of. They do have a last resort flood insurance thing. And but I guess Project 2025 and Donald Trump, the guy who's behind it, even though he says he's not, I guess you get rid of the flood insurance unless you can afford that kind of money.
You got to take a break.
Oh, we have to take a break. Okay, we're talking about these hurricanes, and Helene just left and did massive devastation down in Florida. Now Milton is coming, and it's a pretty scary hurricane. What do you think? Are you worried about where you live? Are you thinking about this if you're looking for a house? If you go to Florida in the wintertime, Fort Myers once again got hammered. We're taking all your calls and texts. 877-301-8970 is the number. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
For a long time, students chose their college based on its academic prestige or party school reputation.
But today, politics is front and center.
LGBTQ plus restrictions.
These policies are making it harder for us to speak our minds.
Too liberal.
Didn't want to take classes that I inherently disagreed with politically.
Reproductive rights.
It's also parents drawing some lines.
I'm Kurt Carapezza.
And I'm John Marcus.
You can hear more about that in our podcast, College Uncovered. Get it today wherever you listen.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And MIT Federal Credit Union, helping members get started on their savings journey with the MIT Federal Credit Union Starter Savings Account, federally insured by NCUA. Membership's open to the general public. More at mitfcu.org. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The mayor will join us in 35 minutes for an hour of Ask the Mayor. All next week, every single day of the week, we will debate a different ballot question. They all start at 11, Jamie? All of them start at 11. And by the way, after the principals, the yes and no sides debate, there'll be an opportunity for you to call in with questions or comments. Ask the Attorney General is Tuesday, 12 to 1. Ask the Governor is Wednesday from 1 to 2. And ask the astronaut, well, you're not going to get to ask her anything. Actually, you can text your questions if you have them in advance or tweet them in. Sunita Williams is going to join us at 11:40 next Wednesday from the International Space Station. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about Hurricane Milton barreling towards Florida's Gulf Coast right after Hurricane Helene, and we're asking you not only about that and what your reaction is to this obvious evidence of horrible climate change, but if you're worried here as well. 877-301-8970.
Here's a few of the texts. This is from Julie on Cape Cod. How do I feel about all this? Sick. And you see the shrinkage of all the beaches down there, the National Seashore, where you go, Jim. They're not as nearly as big as they used to be. Mm-hmm. Here's from Shoshana in Walnut Creek, California. I live in the East Bay Hills of the San Francisco Bay Area. We just had 9 straight days of temperatures above 100 degrees in October. Today it's actually cooled down to 97, and we have never had weather like this before. And here is I sold my house on Cape Coral, that's in Florida, 3 years ago. After repairing my roof from the hurricane, I could see the writing on the wall. The Florida coast is off limits. And I think we do know the Florida coast is really in trouble. But I think we used to think that a lot of us were immune, and the places like
inland
or in the Midwest.
Yeah.
I mean, more violent tornadoes, more fires, more rainfall, more flooding. I mean, you've noticed the torrential rain. It doesn't just rain anymore. It comes down in sheets.
You know, can I also address one thing before we get back to the calls and the text? This whole Trump, you never, I know it's a useless exercise. Trump has repeatedly lied about all this FEMA money being stolen and used on housing illegal immigrants. And I really don't know if he's lying or if he's dumb enough to believe this, but I guess it doesn't matter. Here are the facts. Congress appropriated $650 million in last year's budget to fund a program that helps state and local governments house migrants. That is true. And they instructed Customs and Border Protection to transfer the $650 million to FEMA to administer the program. That is a totally separate fund. Yes, FEMA is administering that, but that money was passed by the Congress, including a majority Republicans in the House, to fund housing for migrants. All the money for disaster relief, also administered by FEMA, is totally separate. So once again, Donald Trump is lying for political advantage or lying because he is not smart enough to understand what the facts are. Tom in Rhode Island, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey there.
Hi.
Yeah, my brother and his family just moved up from Florida, are living with us looking for a place, because right now, with the lower the lower cost of living up here compared to Florida and the better job prospects and better economy, it offsets any quote-unquote savings. They're also finding out, as they were looking at properties down there, the super high property taxes and the super high insurance rates just made the housing market there so much more uncompetitive, despite how robust the New England housing market is right now.
Did they live, I don't know if you said this, they live anywhere in the path of either Helene or Milton, or no?
They lived in Kendall, Florida, which is in the Miami suburb.
I see.
So perhaps on the southern end, they were, they've experienced some bad storms before. No, quote unquote, nothing like we've seen with Fort Myers Beach getting completely flattened, or what just happened, in the foothills. But that was also a concern, and that's why the insurance rates are just 10 times what they would pay up here.
Tom, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. Good luck to your sibling. 877-301-8097. Can I just go back to another thing? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be as naive as I appear to be. The Vice President of the United States, who could be the next President of the United States, calls you on the phone to say something about the storm, and the governor of Florida doesn't take the call because it's a political stunt. Why doesn't he take the call? And if he chooses afterwards to say it was political or whatever, but in a few months, she could be the leader of this country and obviously have some value to Ron DeSantis when the next hurricane hits Florida. But just because he's scared that Donald Trump will be upset if he says something kind about federal assistance like the governors of South Carolina and Georgia did?
One of the theories that you hear a lot is when Hurricane Sandy hit, Barack Obama, Chris Christie met on the tarmac at some airport down there, and they hugged.
I remember it.
And Chris Christie had to answer for that for months and years from people that think you can't hug the president when he's coming to rescue you. And by the way, right now, FEMA does cover 75% of the disaster costs, and again, under Project 2025, they may not even cover 25% of the cost of disasters. This is all part of this is a climate change denying document among its other horrible sections, including what it would do to women. David in New Hampshire, thank you for calling.
Hi, David.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I'm calling from Hancock. Your favorite town.
We love it.
Oh, yes.
A lot of good people there.
Peeps.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yep. Heather Cox Richardson in one of her recent newsletters pointed out that, as Trump often does, he's accusing the Democrats and the Biden administration of doing something that he actually did when he was president. He illegally diverted money from FEMA
You're right.
to the border.
I forgot that. You're right. Sorry, that is great that you brought that up and that she did too. It is, we were discussing this yesterday. That is one of his things. He deflects attention from his misdeeds by accusing others of doing the exact same thing. For example, like democracy. The greatest threat to democracy, according to Donald Trump, is Joe Biden, who didn't attempt to overthrow the government of the United States. But I'm really glad you brought that up, David. Thank you. And hi to everybody up there in Hancock. That is incredible. He did do that. I totally forgot about that.
I hope this is David from Taunton. I hope he's joking, but he says his reliable sources on TikTok say the Democrats are constructing 30-foot fences around Tampa and only letting the Democrats out.
Well, obviously, he's not
this is
serious.
what Biden and Harris. Well, he may have seen this, and they're caging.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and then he says he may have seen this on. If he's serious, he said he saw this on TikTok. They're caging the children of Republicans and selling them overseas.
877-301-8970.
Well, as we all know, Hillary Clinton, of all people, that was one of the craziest things of all when she was supposedly running a pedophile sex ring in the basement of a pizza joint in Washington, D.C.
Which we went to.
You can say a lot of things about Hillary Clinton. You can dislike her, but I don't know. I just don't see her as somebody running a pedophile ring in the basement of a pizza joint.
How great was the pizza in that place?
Pizza was great.
Comet Ping Pong Pizza. And by the way, Marjorie's making light of this, and I have too, just as another example of a lie that had consequences. When Marjorie and our team, we were down in Washington for the Trump inauguration, and we went to Comet Ping Pong Pizza, and we spoke to the general manager of the restaurant who'd been there the night the guy came up from either North or South Carolina.
With a long rifle.
The guy had a loaded weapon and shot it inside the packed restaurant. So yet again, sort of like the lies about the storm, people could die as a result of these lies, and he just doesn't give a damn. Okay, we got to move on. We're going to talk to the mayor about this, at least as it relates to Boston, in about 30 minutes when she joins us.
Yes, we're going to talk with Trenni Casey. Up next, we're going to talk a little bit about the poor New England Patriots. We knew that they were going to be bad. We didn't think they'd be that bad. And a bunch of other sporting news, including a big change in the NCAA. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com.
Voices that will keep you on top of the world.
Listen each weekday. This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Boston Children's Hospital, ranked the #1 pediatric hospital in the world by Newsweek. Boston Children's, where the world comes for answers. bostonchildrens.org/answers. And Blythewald, presenting the big, beautiful bamboo birds, bamboo sculptures ranging in size from 15 to 30 feet tall. Visitors can see the giant owl, queenfisher, peahen, and more all around the gardens. Tickets at blythewald.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The mayor will join us in less than a half hour for an hour of Ask the Mayor. Attorney General will do the same with her office on Tuesday. The governor will do the same on Wednesday. Every single day, ballot questions, debates, Monday through Friday at 11, questions 1 through 5. And Sunita Williams will zoom in from the International Space Station at 11:40 right here at the library on Wednesday. Joined now by Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a BPR contributor. Hi, Trenni. How are you?
Hi.
You know, it just occurred to me, aren't the Bruins supposed to play in Florida?
They are. They're playing the Florida Panthers this evening.
What's going on with that?
As of right now, I think it's the Florida Panthers. Yeah,
it
Florida
is.
Panthers.
I think so, yeah.
I always think Carolina Panthers because that's the football team, but no, it's the Florida Panthers.
Yeah.
The defending Stanley Cup champions. The game is on. I guess the hope is that they get the game in. It starts at, I think it's 7 o'clock. You're done by 9:30. You're on the plane by, I don't think the storm's supposed to hit until like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
It's pretty surprising to me that they...
What town is the game in?
Oh, I think it might be close to Miami.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering correctly.
Well, that's good because Miami may not be as badly
I don't think it's in it's not near, because the Tampa Bay Lightning are Tampa.
Yeah.
I think the Florida Panthers are like Sunrise, like something sort of like right outside of the Miami area.
Yeah.
I know that as a sports person, I should know that, but
okay.
Florida, you just try to, other than the Taylor Swift song, you just try to block most of it out of your brain.
Okay. So
just north of Miami is where they play.
The headline
sometimes.
from
Is it Sunrise? Is that
I'm
right?
not sure where it is, but I think it is. Yeah.
The headline from the New York Times: the NCAA's landmark athlete pay settlement explained.
So I
can
thought
you
this was
explain
a
it for us?
preliminary settlement. That is what I thought I read yesterday, that it does have an opportunity to go, kind of through another leg. But what this settlement does, and Charlie Baker is quoted, obviously former governor, now president of the NCAA, is quoted in the story as saying this is a huge deal for the NCAA as they try to navigate these new waters with paying athletes. Basically, it's going to retroactively give universities around the country, I think, is it $2.63 billion? Or am I making that?
It's a piece of that, I think, yeah.
It's a very large sum of money.
$2.8 billion.
$2.8 billion.
That's the whole deal, I think. But go ahead.
That is going to let universities back pay athletes who were not eligible for like NIL money back in the day, but also pay other athletes across the board. It's essentially creating a pay-to-play system without relying so heavily on NIL money. NIL money being name, image, and likeness. Because the problem with NIL money being the sole driver of finances in college sports, which, let's be honest, these athletes are just turning into employees who happen to work for the university. But going forward, it's going to be a revenue sharing system. So if you go to, Alabama and you are a football player on the Alabama football team, and the Alabama football team has TV rights, and they have merchandise, and they have all of these things. Now, I believe, at least to my reading of this, and Jim, you're the lawyer, I honestly, sometimes my eyes glaze over when I read stuff like this because it's confusing to me. But from what I understand, it's going to take a percentage of those profits and then share them with student athletes. I think where the gray area comes in, guys, is that it's still, I think, to a lot of, we'll call them Olympic sports or secondary sports, the main two sports being, in most schools, being men's football, men's basketball, and in some schools, women's basketball. I think someone who's maybe like a college swimmer or a college track star or a college soccer player or lacrosse player, if they're not one or two of these star athletes who's also good looking and marketable and can't get this extra money from boosters, is there going to be enough money to go around so that it's fairly distributed amongst all genders, all sports? I think that's still sort of the hang up.
And it's up to the individual schools how they distribute the money, right?
So, and listen, it is only fair. If you're a college football player, again, I'll just use Alabama as the example, who was the number one team in the country going into the weekend until they lost to Vanderbilt. You are bringing in a ton of money for the university. The rights deals that they sign with ESPN and NBC and CBS, the money that is around college football and college basketball is astronomical, but so are jersey sales and merchandise and food and concessions, all these things that pro athletes get a portion of in their contract, in their union contracts. I also think that what this is, guys, is a way to try to avoid unionizing college athletes.
Exactly correct. I couldn't agree with you more.
This is a way of saying, no, look, we're paying you, don't unionize, so we have to actually pay you what you're worth. Look, we're trying to make this equitable. I'm not sure if it squashes that. It may squash it at the top. I'm not sure if it has a trickle-down effect.
So should we think this is a good thing or a bad thing?
I guess it depends on how you feel about college athletics. I guess I think it's a good thing because I just feel like college sports, especially, again, football and basketball, are turning into these haves and have-nots. It's similar to Major League Baseball, right? I'm a massive Milwaukee Brewers fan. And my team struggles to compete year in and year out because it's not an equitable situation, right? You get some revenue sharing down the line, but if you're in Milwaukee, which is the smallest market in baseball, versus if you're a Yankees fan or a Phillies fan or a Dodgers fan, where you're getting massive TV dollars, ticket prices are higher there, you have all this extra source of revenue. There isn't a salary cap in Major League Baseball the way there is in other sports like the NFL, which at the very least gives every team, if you manage your team correctly, a fighting chance. And you can go out and add pieces that you need to, and that's, I think, what is happening to college athletics, to bring it back, is that you have the Big 50. I'm not even going to call it the Big 10 anymore. Like every school in the country is in the Big 10 now. But you have the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, and these conferences, and then the Big East, I think, in basketball. You have these conferences that are the biggest and most lucrative in the sport, yet you have all of these other schools that are sort of left floundering on the edges.
Yeah.
And what it's leading to, and I think we see this more in college basketball than we do in college football for whatever reason, but maybe it's just I don't follow college football as closely as I do college basketball. You have these transfer portals. So you have kids that are jumping from school to school to school because let's say you start at Alabama, but you're not a top player at Alabama, and then Georgia calls you and says, well, you know what? Our linebacker just left. You'd be a starting linebacker here. Come here. We'll pay you more. And then maybe the kid's like, well, I'm still not getting enough good playing time at Georgia. So you know what? I'll go to Wisconsin. Little bit of a step down, but they're going to pay me more to be at Wisconsin. So you've got these kids that are jumping around. It's not even about school anymore. I think that's the biggest farce. They're professional athletes. It's just a minor league system for the NFL.
The answer to your question, at least from me, and I don't understand
and the NBA,
is at least for the stars, and I hope it's equitably distributed. The schools are some of the schools are making zillions of dollars because they're great players, and if they are, you should
pay
participate.
Them. Yeah.
But I just
because
still
think
don't
of how much money like Nick Saban made when he was the head coach at Alabama. And he's profiting off of all of these kids that he's no longer the coach at Alabama. He's now an analyst at ESPN. But that's the other problem. You have these state employees who are the highest paid people in the entire state for coaching a team. It's a real messed up. I've had problems with the college athletic system for a long time, basically since I started to understand better how it is structured in other countries, right? Like this does not exist anywhere else in the world except for the United States. Like only in the United States is college prohibitively expensive for almost everyone, unless you're in the top 5%. Of earners in our country. Only in the United States do you feel if you're a kid, like my sister and my brother-in-law, like they both do okay for themselves. My brother is a detective and he's on the dive team for the Dane County Sheriff's Department. My sister is she works for I hate to call it a life coach because that makes it seem kind of like cheesy, but it's like this
I should call her.
This group for like moms, like she's kind of, whatever. They both do well for themselves. They own a home. They have 2 kids. But they are like talking to recruiters about my 14-year-old niece already because their best path to not be in debt to send my niece and nephew to college is for them to get full rides in athletics or academics. My nephew probably more likely to get it in academics. My niece probably more likely to get it in sports. But like that's their path to college, and that's the problem here. Is I think a lot of parents in middle to lower middle class to poor families see sports as the only way to go to college.
The only thing we don't understand, which we'll try to figure out by next time you're here, is it going to trickle down to the average athlete who's good enough to make the team?
Right? Is it going to trickle down?
But it's not the star.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it doesn't, then I don't quite get it.
Okay.
We're talking to Trenni Casey. Can we talk about this Patriot who was arrested for domestic violence for Jabril Peppers?
Jabril Peppers. I don't know how much of the report that you've read. Obviously, the details from the police report, from what his girlfriend says, are horrifying. This took place early in the morning, the night before a game, I should point out. The Patriots played the Miami Dolphins on Sunday, and Jabril Peppers was arrested, I believe, around 3 or 4 a.m. on Saturday morning. The woman says that Jabril Peppers threw her against a wall, I believe 6 times, attempted to choke her, that he threw her down the stairs. When he arrived at the police station and he gave them his wallet, there was white substance in it. To the best of my knowledge of everything I've read, he did admit that was cocaine.
Yeah, I think he did.
So he was charged with cocaine possession and domestic battery, a number of different counts of domestic battery. He and his attorney are saying that, we see this all the time. I'm sure the truth lies somewhere in the middle, that she was intoxicated. It should be noted that the police did not feel that when they spoke to her, she seemed intoxicated or unable to communicate with them. He tried to say that he didn't push her down the stairs. She was drunk and she fell down the stairs. He claims that she wanted him to have unprotected sex with her. He refused and then did not want to be physical with her. So she got physical with him and got belligerent.
By the way, I'm not sure the truth does lie somewhere in the middle.
It's just
these pro athlete things. Often the truth lies that in the fact that the woman is telling the truth.
Right, and
the
then
athlete
she's scared
wants
into not.
Exactly.
Yes.
And by the way,
Choking is one of the worst things before killing. I mean,
Yes.
that's from
You know
the preliminary there.
You know what's also interesting? Someone sent this dissent from an State's highest court decision. I was shocked by this. In 2023, there were 14,000 domestic assault cases filed in the district and Boston Municipal Court, even more than simple assault and battery, meaning it's the most filed kind of case. And the reason they are not prosecuted so much as often the woman is convinced for whatever reason to back off. There should be some sort of system which says, once the police have it, at least in my estimation, even though you can't be forced to cooperate, the charges should continue. And I don't understand, if the Patriots care so much about these kinds of issues, why is the guy not suspended? And then if it turns out it's proven that he's not guilty, he's put back in place. But why isn't he suspended?
I don't know. I mean, this is a captain, right? This is someone who's supposed to be a leader on the football team. Listen, I know that there is the innocent until proven guilty, but he was placed in handcuffs and led away. Like, there was enough at the scene. And again, I'm not sure how we handle domestic violence situations.
You have to arrest somebody. Get him out. Well, I shouldn't say you have to arrest him. You have to get him out of the house.
I guess what I was going to say, I don't know. Like, do we send a specialist? Is it officers? Is it someone who's trained to read a situation? I'm not 100% sure. I thankfully I've never been involved in a domestic situation, so I don't know what happens in the protocol of it. I think the Patriots will look at it and say, it has to run. Now, I don't know if he won't be suspended.
He hasn't been.
He has not been yet. I don't know if, as they gather more information, if the Patriots are trying to do their own due diligence and try to figure out what happened.
He was a crappy player. You think he would have been suspended?
I don't know. Honestly, on this team, everybody's a crappy player, Jim, to be quite honest, not to make light of the situation. But to your point, Jim, he is a good defensive player. He is their other safety. Kyle Duggar is hurt. This is a team that does not have very many good players on it. And I do wonder if right now football, and they can hide behind we're going to let it go through the justice system before we make a decision, or we'll allow the NFL. They did notify the NFL immediately as soon as they found out about what happened. He did not play. I will say this. He did not play on Sunday. He was listed as having a shoulder injury, but what people have heard or understood is that he probably would have played on Sunday had this not happened.
Well, maybe they should tell the truth then, instead of saying it's shoulder injury.
I don't know. I feel like they always protect these guys, right? And it's one of a litany of problems right now with the Patriots to me, and it is emblematic of a loss of control and stability within that organization.
Speaking of that, theoretically, we're going to talk about how horrible they are. I'm not that interested in that because they are horrible, as you said. I'm really interested in Mookie Betts, who I never thought when he was here, a guy who's now in the Los Angeles Dodgers, won world championships with both, and probably on his way to the Hall of Fame. I never felt he was an outspoken kind of person, but he's now speaking out about his concern about how there's so few black people in stadiums where the baseball players are playing. I looked it up this morning. The percentage of players in the major leagues right now in baseball who are black is 6%. In 1991, it was triple that. 18%. And he made another interesting point, and I'd love you to comment on. But he said, I don't have the profile that other stars do. And he made the point, which I'd never thought about. If LeBron James is walking through here, I assume 90% of the audience would know who he was. If Mahomes, the quarterback for the Chiefs, arguably the second best ever, maybe, was walking through, we'd know. I wouldn't recognize Mookie Betts. I don't think so. And I follow baseball a little. Maybe I would. But why is that? And how about his standing up and saying we have to have greater appeal to black fans?
So I will take the first question.
Sure.
Why would you not recognize them? Baseball has a problem with that. They do not. They have a marketability problem. Unless you are a baseball fan, young people are not into baseball. And I will say they've done a valiant job of trying to speed up the game and make it more interesting. Games used to be 3+ hours. Now they're averaging, around 2 hours and 40 minutes. The playoffs have been exciting. You've got rivalries. You had the Brewers and the Mets get into it. You had the Mets and the Phillies get into it. You had the Dodgers and the Padres get into it. I love baseball, so I know this is happening, but I'm also a middle-aged person, right? I grew up watching baseball. Young people are not. And Major League Baseball historically has done a terrible job of marketing their stars. Like you turn on you turn on the TV, and even if you're just watching something that is non-sports related, you see Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Travis Kelce, Jason Tatum, everywhere in commercials. Do you see any baseball?
Mahomes,
would you recognize Shohei Ohtani? He's one of the greatest athletes on the planet.
Excuse me. What is Patrick Mahomes doing with a hairdresser? Is he doing shampoos or something? It's an odd thing.
He does almost everything.
I think he's doing he's the
stylist.
The dandruff one, right? Like with Troy Polamalu. Think about this. Troy Polamalu has been out of the league. I covered Troy Polamalu when I was in Pittsburgh.
He's the one with the hair down to his waist.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was a
is he doing head and shoulders?
Linebacker or safety. Perhaps? He is. He's head and shoulders.
There you go.
And he's been out of the league forever. Like I covered him from 2002 to 2007 in Pittsburgh. That was eons ago. And he's still in commercials. And name me a commercial where you see a baseball player.
Okay, we only have 2 minutes left, so address the other thing.
But
why are there no black people going to the games? Because there are no black players.
Well, there's no black players, right? And I think it's an expensive, it's a heavily travel team sport. It is just a sport that for whatever reason that demographic is not interested in anymore. Mookie Betts wanted to play basketball. His nickname is Mookie after Mookie Blaylock. His parents loved it. He was a great bowler. He's an unbelievable bowler, unbelievable basketball player, but he's 5'9" and 170, so he's not going to 5'11" and 170. He's not going to play basketball, but he just happened to also be good at baseball. The problem is kids choose basketball and football. They do not choose baseball because also you have to be so good. Otherwise, you toil in the minors making $30,000 a year.
You know, you missed one little factoid that I just read last night in that same piece. His initials, I can't remember what it is.
Oh, it's MLB.
MLB, because his mother wanted him to play Major League Baseball.
He's Marcus Lynn Betts.
That's what it is, yeah.
I think is his name. Actually, that was something, and I covered Mookie a ton, obviously, when he was here. It was when I was on the beat more often. His father is wonderful. His mother is wonderful. Oh, that's really good to hear.
is
a great guy, and he always quietly did things. Like, do you remember the time that after I almost said the Patriots, after the Red Sox, I think
outside the library.
Outside the library, he brought food to a homeless man that he had seen out here all the time, and his family had a big celebration, and he saw this man sitting out there, and the only reason anyone found out is because someone on the street did actually recognize Mookie Betts at the time, took a video of it, sent it to someone. Like, he was just a really good guy. Like, he still wears around his neck. They talked about the necklaces. He has just it's like a plastic little baseball. It was a kid who I think came to the ballpark who was battling cancer or Make-A-Wish or something, and he gave it to Mookie, and Mookie hit 2 home runs that night. He's never taken that necklace off. He's just he really is a great guy. Comes from a great family. And the Red Sox, like they do many things, really screwed it up by not giving him what he was worth and letting him leave for the Dodgers. So well done, John Henry et al.
On that note, good to see you, Trenni.
You too, guys.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Trenni Casey.
To Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community, one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
I'm digital producer Hannah Reale, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 2, Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. The 12 o'clock hour, it's Mayor Michelle Wu, here for October's Ask the Mayor. We'll talk about housing, transit, schools, MCAS, and the mayoral election next year. Have a question for the mayor? Call or text, or just come on down to the BPL to ask her in person.
I'm Marjorie Egan. We'll also talk about the cost of the city's climate resiliency with more than 40 miles of vulnerable coastline and her business tax plan that she said would avoid a huge residential tax hike in an attempt to balance.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden says he is being briefed on Hurricane Helene recovery and the incoming hurricane, Milton, that is expected to make landfall in Florida's Tampa Bay area by tomorrow night.
I've been briefed by the senior leaders of this administration and who are driving up preparedness for Hurricane Milton, which could be one of the worst storms in 100 years that hit Florida.
Residents of the Tampa Bay area are evacuating ahead of Hurricane Milton. It's currently a major Category 4 storm, top sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. Carrie Sheridan with WUSF in Sarasota reports that many beach areas were wrecked by Hurricane Helene less than 2 weeks ago.
Sarasota Emergency Management Chief Sandra Tapp-Fumine says expect 10 to 12 feet of storm surge, about double what the area saw in Hurricane Helene.
If you are on a barrier island or near the coastline, you will not survive this storm surge, and it is imperative that you evacuate.
Manatee County Public Safety Director Jody Fisk says communities have not recovered.
I don't know that there are the correct words. I know that they've suffered a devastating loss, and unfortunately, this storm is coming right at us again.
Evacuation orders are for coastal and inland areas. For NPR News, I'm Carrie Sheridan in Sarasota.
Now, the Associated Press reports the center forecasts storm surges of 10 to 15 feet along a stretch of coastline north and south of Tampa Bay, likely swamping low-lying areas. Forecasts of 5 to 10 inches or more of rainfall threaten flash flooding farther inland. And more than 1 million people are under evacuation orders as Hurricane Milton continues its track toward Florida's western coast. The UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon says it is having a hard time keeping its troops safe and delivering humanitarian aid to southern Lebanon, where Israel has intensified its airstrikes. NPR's Ada Peralta has the latest.
UNIFIL spokesperson Andrea Tanetti tells NPR Israeli soldiers have set up positions right next to a camp of Irish peacekeepers. At the moment, Hezbollah and Israel are trading heavy fire.
That, of course, will put in serious danger our peacekeepers in that specific position.
Tanetti says it's also been difficult to deliver aid because shelling is ongoing, and Israel does not give the peacekeeping mission any warning.
We don't really get assurances of safety of our convoy. We provide the information, but sometimes we don't get any feedback.
In some southern cities, he says, civilians are running out of basic supplies, including food and water. Ada Peralta, NPR News, Beirut.
U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Dow is up 66 points. You're listening to NPR News.
From the GBH newsroom in Boston, I'm Craig Lamolt. The Supreme Judicial Court heard arguments on Monday over the state's authority to enforce the MBTA Communities Act. The law mandates that communities served by the transit agency allow for more multifamily housing. Attorney General Andrea Campbell is suing the town of Milton after voters there rejected a plan to comply with the law. At a press conference, Campbell stressed the Zoning Act is necessary to solve the state's housing shortage.
No one should be able to pick and choose which laws they want to comply with. And I hope the court will see the significant consequences of continuing to allow Milton's noncompliance.
During the hearing, SJC justices suggested the law's guidelines weren't designed properly and might not be enforceable. The SJC is expected to deliberate for at least the next several weeks. A ribbon-cutting ceremony is underway this hour at the Port of New Bedford to mark the completion of the North Terminal Expansion Project. The terminal has been under construction for around 2 years. New Bedford Mayor John Mitchell says the expansion will increase capacity, reduce costs at the port, and expand facilities for commercial fishing. It's also expected that contractors will be able to assemble wind turbines to be placed off the Atlantic coast. Massachusetts lawmakers say the development will create thousands of new clean energy jobs. The Bruins open the season tonight in Florida against the Stanley Cup champion Panthers. The puck drops at 7, and the home opener is on Thursday when the Bruins host the Canadiens. Mostly sunny day with a high near 65. Partly cloudy tonight, temperatures in the upper 40s, and tomorrow looks mostly sunny with a high in the upper mid-60s. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with Snapshot, a personalized program that bases rates on safe driving habits, at Progressive.com. Not available in California or from all agents. This is NPR.
Eastern Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be joined any second by Boston Mayor Michelle Wu taking our questions and yours at 877-301-8970.
And Marjorie meant to say the Attorney General will be with us on Tuesday from 12 to 1. The Governor will be with us on Wednesday from 1 to 2. Sunita Williams will be with us from the International Space Station, zooming in live at 11:40 on Wednesday, and every single day next week. Starting at 11 o'clock, we will have a debate between the two sides, the yes and the no sides, on all 5 ballot questions. That's every day next week from 11 to 12. Sort of joining us now is the mayor of Boston. She'll be with us for the next hour to take your questions and ours at 877-301-8970. You can call or text. Or if you're at the library, you can go find our colleague, wherever she is, Zoe. She's somewhere. Is she over there? Whatever she is. She'll be there soon at that table. Oh, hi, Zoe. How are you? You have to run after Zoe. If you can catch up with her, you can give her a question. Maybe something will happen. In the interim, Mayor Michelle Wu, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello. I'm great. How are you?
Just
Thank
made
you
that.
very much.
How you doing?
Mayor Wu,
I'm good.
For joining us. Oh, we have another present. We always have presents.
Let me
for
tell
this.
you, it doesn't get much better.
This is great. Oh, swag.
Oh, we want to ask you about
love
this.
Swag.
Let's do it now. This is Boston Centers for Youth and Family. You're doing something right after the show with them, correct?
That's right.
What are you doing?
We are cutting the ribbon on a fully renovated new Johnson Center. These are going to be the commemorative bags and T-shirts from that event. So BCYF, our Center for Youth and Families, has a number of spaces, and some of them over time had gotten contracted out to different organizations who were doing great work, but often had a very much more limited target population of who was then using these spaces. This is one where when the contract ran up, the community really wanted everyone from all generations and ages to be able to have a space right next to the housing development and right there. So we spruced it up a little bit.
Nice.
New basketball courts that had been used for storage for many years that will be fully activated, and we're excited to see what comes of it.
That's fabulous.
Mayor Wu, that is fabulous, but something that is really scary, I think, to a lot of people now, we've seen Hurricane Helene down in Florida, and now this other Hurricane Milton. I think it's been reduced to a category 3. Is it 4 now or 3?
Winds are still
5.
150 miles an hour.
So pretty devastating. I didn't realize, so I read this piece in the Globe, we have 47 miles of coastline vulnerable to Boston to flooding. But supposedly, according to the people at the Conservation Law Foundation, it's going to cost billions of dollars to make our coastline climate resilient. So what do we do?
Yeah, the good news is that much of that has been mapped out in terms of knowing what we need to do eventually. And then the details of who actually builds the raised shorelines or berms or other types of interventions, and how do we fund it, those are going to take longer. Some of this is tied up, for example, with the Army Corps of Engineers, where they are doing a comprehensive study with Boston that will unlock a significant amount of funding, but they aren't scheduled to be done until something like 2027, 2028 in terms of their study. And so the timelines here are much more urgent than we know we will be finished with the entire coastline by. Much of it is private property as well. So we have to be ready now for what might come any day. And as we see all the images from Florida and North Carolina and all the states along the coast there, the difference between having some version of ready-to-go deployable flood barriers versus trying to fill sandbag for days and not making it in time, we're not willing to take that kind of risk. And so we're starting now, coordinating with different property owners, and we did a first-in-the-nation Deployables Day a couple weeks ago that highlighted how with airtight, metal, watertight, barriers deployed in front of T-station entrances or public buildings or major downtown residences, we can do a lot to actually provide that first step in protection.
So they're up to they're like 4 to 6 feet tall, I read, and they supposedly keep the water from going down like into the blue line there by the aquarium station.
Yeah, by City Hall and areas in East Boston, and it can take just a couple hours to assemble it. They're ready to go, and they're only there when we know we need them. And there's a video online that our climate cabinet put out if anyone wants to learn more.
Okay, so the Army Corps of Engineers is doing the study with Boston. Theoretically, it would, depending on the results, unlock billions in federal dollars, and you're nodding in agreement. As you said, maybe in 2027. Let's assume I don't mean this facetiously, I mean it seriously. Let's assume a climate denier is president of the United States and runs the federal government in 2027 when the Army Corps of Engineers said Boston needs X billion dollars. What happens?
We are doing everything possible to avoid that scenario. I mean, I think in some ways we saw federal agencies where they could, the kind of rank and file staff or those who were longtime employees doing what was possible under the last administration, that is trying to run under the former Trump administration. But they were far less prepared in 2016 to implement what I think they are envisioning now, right? Project 2025 lays it all out, and it's going to go a lot deeper than it did last time around even. So we have, I mean, it's impossible to overstate how much funding, resources, technical support has come from this current federal administration directly to Boston to be deployed on a number of areas. And it's sometimes people think about these elections just as ideology or things that are very, very important as well. But it really, at the city level, boils down to dollars that have created infrastructure, created programming that makes a huge difference, and we can feel it on all levels, from the existential nature of our democracy and it continuing, down to whether we will have the ability to protect our residents from the scenarios that we need.
We're talking to Mayor Wu. She'll be with us till 1 o'clock at 877-301-8970.
We have some breaking news.
What's
I
that?
often don't get to say that, but we have a little breaking news here from the New York Times. They're talking about the Biden administration having just unveiled a landmark EPA rule to require water utilities to replace virtually every lead pipe in the country within 10 years. What do you think?
Well, can I just say what I think? The good news is 10 years, which will give the Supreme Court plenty of time to reverse it. But assuming it doesn't, I'm sorry, Mayor Wu, go ahead.
So much of what we are, I mean, I think it's great that there's this window where a lot is still getting on the books in terms of precedents and laws and programs that are getting launched. And there are often processes that can take time to unwind, so getting things going is still really important. Much of this, I hope we will continue to benefit from, and then it could unlock more funding, but Boston is already pursuing this and has been for a while now. There is now currently a program run through the Water and Sewer Commission where anyone who first you can go online and see a map of where there are still lead service pipes into homes or other buildings. And then in just the last couple years, there's now full funding available to be able to replace them for free or with no interest loans. So please check that out.
Let's take some calls. Caroline in the South End, you're on with the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
My question is, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm a landlord, and I keep getting summonses and tickets from inspectional services because of rat problems in the alley. What is the city doing? Because I keep asking the inspector what the city is doing to help the landlords, because all I can do is pay for an exterminator and keep filling the holes that the rats make. And it's very frustrating because nothing's being done other than me paying for exterminators. And I heard last night on the news that in Cambridge, they're giving the rats birth control. And also, I heard on NPR that in Alberta, Canada, they got rid of all the rats. I forget what they did to do that, but they did that. And I don't know what the city can do or should be doing.
Let's hear from the mayor, Caroline. Thank you for your call.
Thank you, Caroline, for taking the initiative of following through and doing what you can as a landlord, and I know that goes a long way for your tenants and for everyone in the neighborhood. If you are curious, there is a lengthy report called our Rodent Action Plan that's available on the city website. It's also linked to our social media, and in fact pinned to my Instagram as one of the evergreen posts right at the top. This was commissioned with a national expert, or rodentologist, I will say, who has steered many cities in identifying the strategies that are specific to different parts of the city. We are actually experimenting with some of those same methods that you had mentioned. Jamaica Plain ran a pilot around birth control as well for rats. There's constant deployment of different techniques that are safe for animals in the larger ecosystem, but also meant to reduce the rat population. But the underlying issue is that we have to get at the food sources, and that has shifted through the pandemic and beyond as more people are at home, more people are eating at home instead of just out at restaurants, and the patterns in terms of where the rats then also moved followed that. And so we lay out in that report different ways that we should be tackling residential neighborhoods versus parks versus sewers and all the different places. Eventually, to really get at this, we need to amend our trash contract, most likely, and move towards more containerization so that trash is more secure when it is put out for pickup, and that doesn't become a constant food source that no matter what we do on the back end, they're still feeding themselves and then generating more population.
Caroline, good luck, and thank you very much for the call.
We have a text about the MCAS exam, and apparently it's going to be a big winner getting rid of the graduation requirement, at least according to David Paleologos, who's a pollster at Suffolk. They do a really good job. Here's what the texter asked. Mayor Wu, does question 2, that's getting rid of the MCAS's graduation requirement, have to be all or nothing? Can we have some students who graduate with an MCAS degree and some who graduate with a high school degree? What are your thoughts, says the texter.
Yeah, I mean, this is why it's complicated to do things through ballot initiative sometimes. There's the immediate deadline, which sometimes can feel like such a benefit when legislative processes can be complicated and drag on and potentially not come to a resolution. But when a ballot question has the language that it has, that's what's going to happen. And so I'm not taking a position on this ballot question publicly because there are some pieces of it that are important. And then there's some pieces that I think I wish potentially had a little bit more nuance or more language that could be worked in through a legislative process. First, I think it's extremely important for all parts of our community and society that there are high standards and clear standards for our education system. And when you have the ability to assess how students are doing in a classroom, that's great feedback for educators, that's great feedback for schools and for cities around what resources need to be deployed. Tests should not be used in a high-stakes way, especially in a one-size-fits-all mechanism that I think we clearly have identified. The MCAS presents some problems when it comes to students with different types of learning needs and how that then impacts the larger diagnostics and the larger stakes that could be attached to it. In Boston, for example, we have MAP testing that is used. We have an IB program that is based on accumulating stackable credentials and capabilities that are defined more by the type of skill rather than checking the box on a certain number of questions answered correctly. So I think we're trying to design a school system that meets the needs of each type of learner, that also gives the feedback and creates consistency across standards. But for a ballot question that just is basically all or nothing with the promise to set up a commission to then figure it out afterwards, I wish there were more detail up front.
So I have two questions about that. One, I don't understand why you think a leader doesn't have a responsibility to say what their position is on a major public policy issue that affects so many people. I mean, I assume the reason you're telling people you're voting for Harris is because you think Harris would be a great president and Trump would be a disaster. Schools really matter, and we read that statewide, including Boston, the results in the most recent MCAS tests show students trailing their pre-pandemic peers in almost every category. They wrote about Boston. Despite a much, this is a quote from the Globe, despite a much ballyhooed reading level, Boston fell further in reading. So this is a pretty central thing. So why did you decide that not saying what your vote would be was okay?
I am torn about this ballot question.
But you're going to vote, right?
There are elements that I think are important around the need to reflect the diversity within our learning communities and the negative consequences that can happen when a one-size-fits-all standard can be applied. But I'm not comfortable with the alternative that this puts in place in terms of what would replace that to maintain high standards.
There is no alternative.
Would I be wrong to say that?
They would set up a commission, I think, to explore things down the road.
That sounds like a no voter to me. Why I don't.
When I I'm trying to separate out my role as an individual voter and when I feel strongly enough about something to fully stand behind a position and with clarity advocate that I believe everyone in the community should feel this way. I think with this one, there's enough gray area that I am not taking a public
But you are
position.
going to vote on it.
I will. Yes,
Okay.
I will vote on everything.
Let's go to Ed in the car. You're on with the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Hey, Ed. Hi.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for taking the call.
Sure.
I'm a supporter of the mayor, but I'm calling this morning about a serious concern I have about our need to support free speech and protests as balanced against those folks crossing over a line and taking over bridges and main thoroughfares, as we saw this weekend on Storrow Drive, a few weeks back in Government Center, and a few weeks prior to that on the Harvard Bridge. I mean, I don't think my buddies and I can take over the Zakim Bridge to bring attention to the fact that golf prices around here are too high. Okay, now, at the same time, here we have people breaking the law in the spirit of free speech, but breaching over those of us law-abiding citizens that are just trying to move on with our day. And yet it's being done with the support of the mayor's office and BPD. And as I said, I'm a big supporter, Mayor. But I'd love to know why we are allowing folks to break the law and intrude against our rights as law-abiding citizens and not being able to just drive up Storrow Drive.
Ed is obviously talking about
thank you for your response.
the pro-Palestinian demonstrations this weekend. Mayor Wu.
Yeah, thank you for calling in, Ed. Just to clarify, this was not a permitted or sanctioned event. There was no support that was given to direct or permit this location and manner of the demonstration. As you point out, free speech is incredibly important everywhere, but especially in Boston and throughout the Common or Copley Square, when Copley Square will be open back again. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of demonstrations that occur safely, without incident, and that is an important part of our democracy. The Boston police and state police responded as quickly as they could to try to clear traffic, to try to make the roadways clear for traffic as quickly as possible. They did not have notice that this was happening, and therefore were responding to it in real time. And when there are so many people, they were moving as quickly as possible to be able to do that, but it was a very different environment and setting than a permanent event that requests police support or escort to keep roadways clear so that a parade can happen, or even a potential demonstration along certain roadways, or one that would be in a location like a public space that would not infringe on traffic and all of that. So this was not something that the city had signed off on in terms of blocking roadways.
Are you comfortable with, John King is going to join us at 1 o'clock, and he just came back from Michigan where he interviewed some students who say they would I'm paraphrasing, they would otherwise be a Harris supporter, but they can't support her because of what the Biden administration has done or not done in Gaza. Are you comfortable with the position that Vice President Harris has taken on the situation in the Middle East?
I think she is continuing to define more of that, as I'm trying to read as much as I can about the various platform initiatives that are still coming out from the campaign. And I think, I was there at the Democratic National Convention where in her acceptance speech she did mention and devote some time to her position there, which acknowledged the atrocities that even just yesterday we were remembering the 1-year anniversary of the terrorist attacks that led to more than 1,000 lives lost, and also demanding the peace in the region, safe return of hostages, and a humanitarian solution to the horrific unfoldings in all the months since last year. So I think that is, she is doing her part as vice president and also as a presidential candidate to be clear that we need to resolve this situation as the United States playing our role in that. And the heartbreak continues with now tens and tens of thousands of lives that have been taken, of civilians, of children, of community members, and holding the pain of all the communities that have been impacted by this abroad and here locally as well is incredibly important as we continue to make sure that Boston is a safe city for everyone and a safe city for people to express their views.
Mayor Wu, we've talked a lot over the years about the fact that the MBTA closes too early for a lot of workers that are working in restaurants downtown, or they're working in clubs downtown, places that stay open late. So we have a little sound from MBTA General Manager Phil Eng. We call him the perpetually upbeat, Ted Lasso-like head of the T. He talked to us about late night service when he visited Boston Public Radio a while back. Here he is.
I have been talking with my operations folks regarding the potential for later night service. One of the things I'd like to do is see how we can improve, as I think I mentioned earlier, off-peak service in general. I think those areas are something I need to look at and I want to look at. I come from a system that was 24/7, and I also know that maybe the ridership is not as strong during those periods, but those people that use the system during those periods do it because they need to.
So what do you think?
I am Phil Eng's #1 fan. Every time I keep texting him the images that have been edited where his eyes are the two red lasers, able to cut through the slow zones and everything that's happening. I just shared at the Chamber of Commerce very recently that it does, obviously there's still more work to be done. The MBTA remains, the lack of reliability remains one of, if not the biggest barrier to downtown being fully activated, to people coming back to work and moving around, and there's so much to catch up on. But compared to 1 year ago, when we were at 27% of the subway system subject to slow zones, we're at 6%. Just a few days ago, and with the Orange Line now going through the major overhaul too, that will be another big chunk fixed up and ready to go. I've heard great reports that the Red Line is much faster now that they have gone through and combed and taken out all of the slow zones and resolved all that. So he has a huge plate of work in front of him that his team are working through very, very intensely. They've done all the pieces to be able to make that possible, built up their workforce, renegotiated contracts to be able to recruit and retain talent, are putting that to in very specific and targeted ways to deliver tangible results for residents. And this example that you just played, I think having the context where it's not just theory to him that, we need late night because it's important for XYZ, but he's been part of a system and has seen the logistics and all the pieces to actually make it happen, and that I think is the most important part of why his leadership has been so effective.
You'd like to see it come back?
Oh yeah, right now, what is distinguishing cities as places where people, let me back up and say, we're in a economic transition everywhere where people can live where they want to live, Zoom sometime more often than not into work where they want to work, and that's changing everything about what cities are for and how to make sure that vibrant cities continue to draw people in. We have to be safe, we have to be family friendly, we have to be climate resilient, we have to be exciting and welcoming and inclusive, and having a thriving nighttime economy not only is about fun and ways to socialize and be together in person, but in a city where so much of our workforce is connected to the healthcare industry, to other 24-hour, our workers who are part of the janitorial staff at large offices, these are all community members who are having to be displaced from Boston because there's no way to both live here and be in the region and get to work on time. And so that would solve a big piece of it, and it would unlock a whole new chunk of our economy.
One last question. Have you spoken to Phil Lang about this or no?
We haven't talked specifically about late night. He knows many of my priorities, but this is definitely something very exciting that he's willing to explore.
Okay.
We're talking to the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. She's going to be with us to the top of the hour. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. If you have a question or text for the mayor, we'll try to get to as many as we can. 877-301-8970 is the phone number. You're listening to Boston Public Radio.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, artist Steve Locke. His new exhibition at Mass MoCA is titled The Fire Next Time, which takes its name from James Baldwin's 1963 collection of essays, which Baldwin wrote amidst the Civil Rights Movement. Like Baldwin, Locke explores themes about racial violence, what it means to be a black man in America, and American history. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com. And Newport Mansions, presenting Wild Imagination, Art and Animals in the Gilded Age, an exhibit exploring how this tumultuous period shaped the roles of animals in our modern world. On view at Rosecliff. Tickets at newportmansions.org. And Boston Children's Hospital, ranked the #1 pediatric hospital in the world by Newsweek. Boston Children's, where the world comes for answers. bostonchildrens.org/answers. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
The ongoing war in the Middle East has caused a lot of fractures here at home. Two friends, one Palestinian American.
This past year was a stress test to a lot of relationships. Not all of them survived.
One Israeli American.
I have lost many friends because of political disagreements.
Praying together and breaking bread together as they work through their complex emotions about this war. I'm Esteban Bustillos. Find the story now at gbhnews.org.
Love that song. What's that song? I love that song. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're speaking with Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. She's here till the top of the hour. You can call her or text her at 877-301-8097. Do you recognize that tune? Or
that sounds good with the audio editing there.
Do you know who that was playing that, by the way? Come on.
I have stopped dreaming about that song every night now, finally.
So a concert for the city, that's what it's called, right? Concert for the city. You go out on the stage and you play one of the great songs ever, Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. Last year you told us you were terrified when you did Mozart. How were you this year?
The Mozart was the slow movement of the Elvira Madigan movement,
one of my favorites,
which is beautiful. But it's not that technically challenging. This one was a stretch, and so I had to engage. I spent about a month preparing and had 3 lessons in the last 3 weeks, one lesson each week with an incredible professor at Berkeley to just kind of get me brushed up. But just for me, it was breathtaking to just absorb the fact that one of, if not the best orchestras in the world is in our city and opens up their stage for community members to be playing right alongside them. I followed Veronica Robles and her mariachi ensemble, the Boston Children's Chorus, the Boston Festival Orchestra, community members who are incredibly talented, wearing all these other hats, doing their jobs, being doctors, teachers, community organizers, and it's just beautiful how our city can come together.
Well, you did it was a beautiful piece, and you did it beautifully.
You could be
really
performing
did.
with the BSO without being the mayor, let me tell you that. It was really impressive.
No,
We're talking to Michelle Wu.
I wonder if you practice at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, you got a pretty busy job, you got the kids. Good for you.
877-301-8970.
So we've talked to you a lot before about your plan to have commercial properties pay more in taxes to take the burden off.
It's not more. It's less.
Sorry. Okay. But because the fear is that residents are going to have a big hike in their tax bill. We got a text early on from somebody in Rosendale who claimed her tax bill has already gone up 25%. She texted earlier. You did have a meeting, because once again, you just can't do this. You have to get approval from the state legislature. So you just had a meeting up in Beacon Hill, including with the Senate President Karen Spilka, about trying to do this. So explain what you're trying to do and where it stood after your meeting, which you said was lovely, I think, with Karen Spilka.
So the overall goal is to make sure taxes are as stable and predictable next year as they have been for previous years. And our system gets slightly out of whack when property values are reassessed throughout the year and residential values go in a different direction from commercial. So because of changing downtown and remote work patterns, commercial properties in basically every downtown across the country are seeing declines as fewer companies are seeing their workers come in person, and that's affecting the markets. Residential properties continue to be very strong, but what this could mean, and we have our latest data now shows at a citywide level that residents could face up to a 28% spike in their tax bills from one bill to another if there's no legislative relief passed, and commercial properties would see a massive tax break. And so what we are asking is for a similar tool, actually the exact same tool as was implemented 20 years ago when a similar situation happened under Mayor Menino, to smooth that transition out. And so rather than residents having a huge spike and commercial properties having a huge tax break, it would be moderated so that commercial properties would have a decrease, but less, not a massive decrease, less so, and residents would have a moderated change similar to what they experienced in previous years.
You said a minute ago that residential rates could go up 28%. The could, not will. Meaning, let's assume the legislature does what it generally does, except on liquor licenses, and not do anything to help Boston. Well, you should speak to that, not me. Not pass this thing which the House has already approved. There are alternatives, even though you don't prefer them. There is cutting of the budget, which I assume you could do. Or have you come out that there is no room to be cutting, and if they don't approve this, there's a 28% increase on residential taxpayers?
I want to be clear about this, because that is the number one thing we hear of, why don't you just spend less and therefore you won't need to shift as much between commercial and residential. And that's actually a misunderstanding of the way that tax law works. If we cut the budget, which again is salaries for teachers, police officers, our sanitation workers, and everyone who keeps the city running, but let's say we were to cut the budget significantly, the surplus money that would come in from tax revenues would then go to reserves. It would not affect this shift. The only way that cutting the budget would lead to a change in this, what is impacted from this tool, is if we both cut the budget and then take less than the Prop 2.5 allocated amount. So, not at the risk of getting too down the rabbit hole, several decades ago, cities everywhere in Massachusetts were subject to Proposition 2.5, which cinched a tight belt that budgets had to be balanced by state law, and revenues from property taxes could not go up more than 2.5% each year.
Except for new construction.
Except for new construction, because your population is growing, so then you need more services. In the 43 or so years that Prop 2.5 has been in place, more than half of those years have seen inflation greater than 2.5%. So just to keep pace with the salaries and basic inflationary pressures, we have to take 2.5% and find other revenue to try to keep up. If we were to take 2.5%, whether from cutting, less than 2.5%, whether from cutting our budget or some other way, we would be forever behind, and even trying to catch up even more with inflation of maintaining city services. The ratings agencies have all pointed to the stability of Prop 2.5 as key to our economic stability overall. And so it would actually be a fiscally irresponsible decision to take less than the 2.5% and set us even further below inflation, and basically try to kick the can down the road to absorb it later on.
Last thing, did you get any indication? Karen Spilka, the Senate President's line was, I brought all the stakeholders together. I don't know what she was saying. And was there any indication that she's going to go the same way as the House, work out some compromise with you, and let the city's leaders do what the city's leaders want to do?
I was at the table with 4 of the advocates who are lobbyists who represent corporate interests. And they have a very specific constituency. And I think we each aired our views that we're very clear where we agree and we're very clear where we disagree. I have since continued to try to engage in conversations with some of those stakeholders about potential ways that we could share more information or even find ways to compromise further. For example, the legislation includes a flexibility window that, when we filed it, we weren't sure if we would actually need it this year or if next year would be the year that this would hit. And so it gives us a 3-year window to implement it at any time and then step down for 3 years after that. But we would be willing to remove that window because we're sure that we will need it next year. We could be more specific about the exact shift numbers. So there's some things that we could do. We also could get at solving the long-term challenge here, which is we need to grow our tax base and expand the sources of revenue. So thinking about how to explore that with stakeholders and or the use of funds that could help spur new development and housing creation. That is all been put out there. The number one response I hear is cut your budget, and that is actually not a fiscally responsible move to make. Nor one that I think actually even the business community wants to have happen, because that would mean cutting the services that they rely on for creating the safest and most vibrant business environment.
And no follow-up with Spilka scheduled yet, I assume?
Nothing is no meeting has been formally scheduled, but we are, we're at the point now because tax bills have to be finalized by late November with the city council and then sent over to the state for final sign-off in December to be able to be mailed out early January. Rolling. So we're at the point now where we need to start really letting residents know what is going to happen and helping people prepare for what could come.
Keegan in Jamaica Plain, you're on with Mayor Wu.
Hey,
Thanks
Keegan.
for calling.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure. Yes.
Great. Hi, Mayor Michelle Wu. I just wanted to ask if you had the chance to read the Ban Cell Phones Now article in the Globe magazine recently and ask if you have an opinion on banning cell phones in schools for students.
Yeah, I think I read the article that you were talking about. I've read a couple different pieces in the Globe, and I agree that it's, and I hear from educators and from others that it does not help with the learning environment, and actually that students even report that they prefer an environment where everybody doesn't have to be on their phones and remembering how to be in person together and have conversations and not feeling the social pressure to either be silent because everyone's texting or the sort of awkward interactions that can follow. And in fact, in Boston Public Schools, we have already been starting to implement some of this policy. It's on a school-by-school basis, and I think upwards of almost 50 schools this school year have Yondr pouches, which lock up the phone at the beginning of the day and then need the teacher or an administrator to unlock the phone at the end of the day, but each student has their own pouch, and so they continue to have their phone with them or in their locker. Those schools implemented policies after they had some community conversations about what would make sense and how family members and students and educators could all feel comfortable. But the feedback from those from the schools that have already been doing this has been very positive about it, and we'll look to keep building this into a citywide policy.
Keegan, thank you for the call. 877-301-8970.
Let's go to John in Weston.
Hi, John.
Hi, John.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call. Hi,
sure.
Mayor Wu. My wife and I recently made a calculated risk to buy a condo in a building on the waterfront in Charlestown. We may live to regret it, but we did a lot of research and talked to a lot of people about that particular location and what was going to be needed for sea rise. And what everybody said was the building itself is in a pretty good location, but it's ultimately the homeowners association is going to have to take some measures on its own, regardless of what the city itself can do. I talked to a senior person in the Resiliency office, and he agreed that private landowners have to take a part of this. So I'm wondering what the city is or will be doing to work with private landowners, like homeowners associations, to make sure they're taking adequate measures to protect their buildings.
Yeah. So thank you. It's incredibly timely as well, seeing what's happening in particularly the southeast region of the U.S. and the regulations that are now being applied to large condo buildings in Florida, for example, and the ripple effects of that. I think in some ways, I don't know exactly which building you're talking about, but the good news, I'll say, is that any building that was approved fairly recently or built fairly recently and has been in the approval window, certainly from here moving forward, but for the last several years as well, has requirements that are fairly stringent built into mitigation, flood resistance, and climate resilience in general. We, however, have a significant number of buildings that were built before those kinds of requirements went into place. And working to help retrofit and also provide the immediate protection is key. And that's a lot of coordination, communication, and outreach between private entities and the city. Some of what, I had talked earlier about our deployable stay initiative, some of that is going to be what we'll have to see, large temporary flood barriers that are stood up in front of major buildings in coordination with the property owners, and then a lot of the changes that certain properties are making to their own, the land that is on their own footprint in terms of adding barriers and making sure that the floodwaters won't come. More and more, it is about making sure the mechanicals of the buildings are up on the top versus on the bottom, where that can knock out an entire system and lead to other challenges around heating and cooling and temperature management and safety. So some of this is about the physical construction and the building codes for the buildings. We have adopted the state's most environmentally stringent code that possible, and are looking to continue helping property owners adapt to that.
Thanks for your call. We talk a lot, and I'm sure you talk and think a lot about the hospitals that the hopefully soon-to-be indicted Ralph De La Torre used to run. And one of the hospitals that didn't stay open is obviously in your city, Carney Hospital. There are a couple of things like your reaction to. One, there's much criticism some criticism of the governor for not having done enough to keep Carney Hospital open in some capacity. And what she has done is appointed, I don't know if it's a commission, we spoke to Michael Curry the other day. Michael and your head of public health, I believe, are co-chairing a committee to address this. One of the issues being that Codman Square is saying that already, not only are their numbers up, but they're seeing sicker patients because they're either not going to the doctor or they're not getting things treated if they are. So are you happy? Are you content with how the state handled this? And are you content about where things are now for the people who depended upon Carney?
Well, we've just released the names of the amazing leaders who are participating on this commission that will meet several times over the next 90 days or so, and then issue recommendations back to the governor and myself. I think the situation is very different at each of the particular hospitals, but from what I gather, and certainly what the commission will be able to dig into more and then share with the public, because I think that's been a little bit of gap in terms of public understanding of the exact differences between the different properties. From what I gather, the patient count was so low, the inpatient count was so low at Carney that it was a vastly different financial situation, and the driving reason why no operator was able or wanted to bid on that. They could not see a financially sustainable plan to keep it operating in its previous form, which was a full-scale inpatient hospital where, frankly, there weren't that many patients staying in the beds. Now, certain types of services were very, very heavily used. The emergency room, imaging services like colonoscopies and mammograms, primary care, outpatient care, but inpatient as part of the financial picture that hospitals or healthcare operators have to put together, that was a big piece of it, plus the what I'm told are facilities deficiencies that to get it up to the scale of the latest technology that needs to be used in all of these settings was going to be a very, very big endeavor to put money into the building. And so given that, I think I've had a lot of private conversations with different healthcare institutions and other experts as well. There was pretty unanimous consensus that we absolutely need healthcare access on the site, and that it needs to take a slightly different form than it did before in order to be financially sustainable. And that's what the work of this commission will do. And so the first step, I think, is to identify what gaps have been left, to hear from all those in the area who are seeing in real time what has happened, to then put together a plan for what services would meet that gap and who could provide those, and then to cost it out and figure out how to fund that and make that happen as quickly as possible.
So you think the governor's decision not to intervene to keep it open was an unavoidable decision?
I think if the state had intervened, it would have required such scale of continued and ongoing subsidy and still would have eventually needed some kind of resolution to what services were on site. And so whether that happened with the state being able to sustain that during that period, or to try to, as quickly as possible, resolve it with this very, very harmful gap in the meantime, that was a question of affordability from the state. And I don't have a clear eye into all their finances, but it sounds like it would have been of a scale that they could not afford.
One thing I wanted to touch on, Mayor Wu, we've talked a lot about how liquor licenses have been historically really, really expensive, and a lot of mom-pop restaurants and neighborhoods, Mattapan, Hyde Park, et cetera, have been unable to get the licenses. So you're doing something with liquor licenses to try to ameliorate that problem. What's happening?
Well, we're very excited that 225 new liquor licenses are coming to Boston, released over a period of different batches over 3 years. And most of these are tied to specific neighborhoods and will return back to the city rather than adding to the private transfer that can inflate the prices up to $500,000, $600,000. So these will create opportunities in the neighborhoods that are most underrepresented and underserved in terms of restaurants and establishments. And our goal is to learn from experiences that the city's had in the past. More than 10 years ago, there was a similar program with fewer restrictions on it, but then all the licenses ended up, one way or another, getting pulled to high foot traffic areas in the city that already had many restaurants. And great to add restaurants everywhere, but we really want a goal of this program to ensure that there's equity in the neighborhoods and to create the vitality that sometimes, when you ask someone what makes your neighborhood special, more often than not, they will point to that place that they go to hang out, be with their friends, celebrate with family. And some neighborhoods have such a lack of options because liquor licenses have been an impediment. So there will be multiple rounds of applying so that we have a clear rubric that will make sure that some of these goals are represented in how the licenses will be given out. And they will happen in rounds so that it's not necessarily just first come, first serve of whoever has the resources to be ready to go will be first in the door. And this, I think, will achieve all of the goals that we're hoping for.
Mayor, we have seen you in action campaigning first for Biden, and you've been very active campaigning for Kamala Harris. With exactly 4 weeks to go, the race is a virtual dead heat. Why is that?
I'll tell you, that was the number one question I got when I was at the Vatican with the governor for the climate summit from scientists all around the world who are experts in climate. And all they wanted to ask me was, why is the election so close in your country? I think people are very disillusioned by government in general right now, and it extends beyond any particular politician or level of government or public program. It's this sense that it can feel so daunting and the gaps are so big and they're getting worse, and it puts more burden. I mean, we really have to hold ourselves accountable in the public sector to say, are we delivering? Are we moving as fast as we can move? Are we proving that it matters when you get involved? Because I think some people are now so frustrated and so far from feeling like this is a way to engage and trust that your life will get better, that it's almost, anything goes, will burn down the system, and that feeling of disenchantment and fear and anger, I think, is driving a lot of the political conversation. And so I keep saying, we just had a number of rallies over the weekend, and events all over the place. We need Massachusetts and Boston to come out as well. Not only do we have a big impact in rallying neighbors and swing states and your networks in different parts of the country, I know of dedicated efforts locally to go in person to New Hampshire and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. There's a group that's taking on Atlanta and the Atlanta area and Georgia as well. But we also need the popular vote to be as big of a margin as possible for what inevitably will still come after the election.
You talked about people losing trust in government. You've been doing this for 3 years as mayor. How good a job do you think you've done at having people in Boston who had doubt about government hearing them? How good a job do you think you've done at restoring that connection?
I think, being at the city level is hard because so much of what we experience is based on the larger cross currents of state or especially national and international affairs and government. And so I hope that we have, if you just put a microscope on Boston, we've been very carefully measuring our progress on any number of dimensions. We can show clear advancement in public safety, in affordable housing, in job creation, in schools, and access to open space and climate resiliency. But it still sits within, I have felt, even over the last 3 years, a continued degrading of trust overall. And that's driven by a number of different factors. And I think we're doing our best to try to model what it can look like when it matters and makes a difference when people come together. We can get things done. We can feel immediately the benefit to people's lives. And we, therefore, in Boston, have even more responsibility to take that on, become that proof point and example nationally.
Good to see you, Mayor Wu. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
That was, of course, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, who visits us once a month, taking our questions and yours. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's calls or texts. We got so many we couldn't do it. Thank you, Mayor Wu. Coming up, after the 1 o'clock news, CNN's John King with a dispatch from Michigan, a big swing state. He's talked to a lot of people out there who said they will not vote vote for Harris over the Biden administration's handling of the war in Israel and Gaza. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
GBH Radio listening is by becoming a GBH sustainer. It takes just 2 minutes to enroll and a few dollars a month on your credit card. Small monthly contributions, huge impact. Learn more at gbh.org/sustainer.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the Umbrella Arts Center, presenting Now, Hear This, the story of 4 friends who embark on a figuratively cosmic adventure to their past and back again. Now through November 10th at the Black Box Theater, umbrellaarts.org. And MIT Federal Credit Union, helping members achieve their financial goals with savings account options, including high-yield money market accounts. Memberships open to the general public. More at mitfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA.
I'm investigative reporter Chris Burrell, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. CNN's John King has a dispatch from Michigan, where some residents say they're sitting this election out in protest of the Biden administration's...
The only good vegetable is broccoli. But he's forgetting about potatoes, sweet potatoes, green beans, arugula, a Cambridge favorite, asparagus, butternut squash, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, red onions, Vidalia onions, spinach.
We get it, Marjorie.
Kale.
The vegetable and you. That's next on
Turnips.
Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The National Hurricane Center is warning Floridians that today is the last full day to get ready for Hurricane Milton and evacuate if told to do so. The storm is a powerful Category 4. It has top sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. NPR's Debbie Elliott reports tens of thousands of people have already left or are leaving the West Coast ahead of Milton's arrival by tomorrow night.
The mass evacuation comes after Milton rapidly intensified to one of the strongest hurricanes on record, feeding off the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Governor Ron DeSantis says much of Florida's peninsula is at risk for a second round of hurricane destruction.
This has been a very difficult time for a lot of people in the state of Florida to have a major hurricane come not even 2 weeks ago. That we got hit with Hurricane Helene.
The state has rushed to clear storm debris ahead of Hurricane Milton's arrival. More than 200 Florida healthcare facilities have moved patients out of harm's way. Debbie Elliott, NPR News.
Vice President Kamala Harris has appeared on ABC's The View, part of a blitz of media appearances less than a month before the presidential election. She used the occasion to disclose her plans for expanding Medicare coverage for senior citizens.
What I am proposing is that basically what we will do is allow Medicare to cover in-home health care.
Former President Donald Trump was scheduled to attend a town hall hosted by Univision today, but that event has been postponed until next week because of Hurricane Milton. President Biden is traveling to Wisconsin today, where he is expected to announce a new rule from the Environmental Protection Agency. NPR's Ping Wang reports the change will require cities and towns across the United States to replace miles of pipes to further reduce lead in drinking water.
Drinking water systems across the country will have to replace lead pipes within the next 10 years. EPA Administrator Michael Regan says that covers a lot of pipes.
We know that over 9 million legacy lead pipes continue to deliver water to homes across our country. But the science has been clear for decades. There is no safe level of lead in our drinking water.
The bipartisan infrastructure law dedicates $15 billion over 5 years towards the massive job of replacing lead pipes. The first step to replacing them is knowing where they are. Water systems are expected to submit an initial inventory of lead pipes next week. Ping Huang, NPR News.
U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 52 points at 42,007. The S&P is up 39 points. The Nasdaq has risen nearly 200 points. It's NPR News.
From the GBH newsroom in Boston, I'm Craig Lamolt. Local officials are reacting to news that Norwood Hospital will officially close by November 5th. The hospital has been closed since major flooding incident 4 years ago, but Steward Healthcare had been rebuilding it before declaring bankruptcy. 4 clinics associated with Norwood Hospital that have continued to operate in temporary space will wind down as well. Norwood's general manager, Tony Mazzucco, says it's no surprise the hospital is officially closing.
The news here is about closure of additional facilities, which is going to come with a further degradation of healthcare in the area, and more importantly, job loss with next to no notice, which I think is really important to note that Steward continues its devastation of the healthcare industry in Massachusetts, and it's just further indication of how they treat their employees and how they treated their patients.
Mazzucco says the real estate company that now owns the Norwood Hospital building is continuing reconstruction, and he's confident it will be sold and reopen as a hospital when that construction is completed in a couple of years. Louis Tiant has died at the age of 83. The charismatic Cuban Red Sox pitcher with a horseshoe mustache was known as El Tiante. Major League Baseball announced his death today, and the Red Sox confirmed he died at his home in Maine. Tiant pitched the Red Sox to the brink of a World Series championship in 1975. He was a 3-time All-Star whose greatest individual season came in 1968 when he went 21-9 with 19 complete games and 9 shutouts, 4 of them in a row. In a post on the social media site X, his former teammate Fred Lynn called El Tiante, quote, a big game pitcher, a funny, genuine guy who loved his family and baseball. Mostly sunny today with a high near 65. Partly cloudy tonight, and tomorrow looks sunny with a high in the mid-60s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. and the listeners who support this NPR station.
He is Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. A few programming notes. We're going to be joined by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell, next Tuesday. She'll be here from noon to 1, taking our questions and yours. And we're going to be doing these ballot question debates every day next week, starting at 11 o'clock.
Well, you left out two people. The governor is coming Wednesday from 1 to 2. And I would argue, no disrespect to the governor or the attorney general, we have a guest zooming in from the International Space Station on Wednesday at 11:40.
That poor woman.
Sunita Williams is going to be zooming in. And we are really, really, really excited.
Okay.
In any case, we're joined now on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, behind the spectacular all over the map reporting project. Hello there, John.
Hello from beautiful Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Hey, before we get to politics for a second, I didn't know till I heard our local news a minute ago. I don't know if you heard, but Louis Tiant died, who I only met once in my life. And he had no idea who I was, and I idolized him, even though I was an out-of-town kid.
He expected Louis Tiant to know who he was.
I didn't mean it that way at all, by the way. I just meant he was so kind and warm and welcoming to everybody. You were here, at least for a piece of Louis Tiant. What did he mean to you, John King?
My dad loved Louis Tiant, number one, growing up. That was one of the ways you watched, the Red Sox, the old Channel 38 in those days, before there was the internet or streaming or anything like that. And I have an autographed ball at home to John from Louis Tiant. I stood in a long line to get that at Fenway Park one day because El Tiante, as a kid, the spin, the wind up, I can't even describe it, but anyone who knows remembers the knee would come up, he would turn all the way around. It was like a corkscrew wind up. And he was always just full of joy and love for baseball. I mean, baseball is my favorite sport in part because of those childhood memories of players like that. And he was just a larger than life figure. And as they said in the newscast there, Fred Lynn referred to the big game. There were some times when someone would say he was an average pitcher, but when it was the playoffs or October, this time of year when the leaves were turning colors, Louis Tiant was a gamer. He's a fantastic childhood memories.
John, I am told to let you know you can put your phone vertical instead of holding it, and we are perfectly fine, even though you're a sweetheart.
I'm ready to switch. There we go.
That's fabulous. That's perfect, John.
So, John King, you've been doing this great reporting project, and I'm always so impressed that people that look so normal believe such crazy things. But in any case, it's all around the country.
Not speaking about John.
No, but some of the people you interview, you think you're like be your next door neighbor, lovely people, and then the things come out of their mouth. I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, you had a great interview. It's going to play some sound here in a second. Interviewing young voters in Michigan. And we're going to play a clip of a 26-year-old Palestinian who will be voting third party and not for Kamala Harris. Here it is.
I'm not voting for Kamala Harris. Not in good conscience. I cannot vote for someone that uses my hard-earned tax dollars to kill my friends and families overseas.
Michigan, of course, is a swing state. Did you hear this a lot in your interviews with these young people, John?
You hear it especially in the Palestinian community in Dearborn. Wabe, the gentleman there, is a student at Wayne State, wants to be a special education teacher, really great guy, interesting personality, voted for Clinton, voted for Biden, says he can't do it because he has family there. Born in Jordan, Palestinian parents, came to the United States. He's a citizen, and he says he just can't do it. And he says there's little she can do in the final 4 weeks of the campaign to change his mind. So he'll most likely vote for Jill Stein. He said Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and a threat to society. He's not going to vote for Donald Trump. You hear a lot of that, too. But that's the hard part. There's so many complicated pieces of the Harris coalition. So that's a subtraction, right? He voted for Biden last time. He's not going to vote. But are you subtracting a full vote because he's not going to vote for Trump? It's not like a gain for Trump. But you hear it a lot. You hear it especially in the Palestinian community, the Arab American community, which is a large community in Detroit and outside of Detroit and Dearborn, up in Hamtramck as well. But you also hear it from other students on campus. It was different. 3 times we've been out to see these voters, the younger voters on campuses in Michigan. It is different. More of them are making the calculation, I'm still mad about Gaza and Israel, but abortion rights, the climate, LGBTQ issues, other issues. Okay, I'm going to vote for Harris, even though I'm mad about that. So some are making the more complicated decision. But we did find a fair amount who still say, no, this one issue is going to be my defining issue in this election. So that's part of the math challenge for Harris. The Democratic coalition is a lot more complicated. And this is one of the pieces she's been trying to, at least she's not going to fully repair it, but she's been trying to fix it.
We should remember, wasn't it somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000? I know that was a primary of Democratic primary voters that voted uncommitted in Michigan. Am I right about that, roughly, that number?
That is right. That's exactly right. And so, again, there will be Democrats who would say, do the math from last time. Biden won by 154,000 votes, and this is a protest vote in the primary, and we're not going to lose all of those votes. And all of those things may be true. The question is, we know there are a handful of states going to be very close. Michigan was the biggest Biden win of the battlegrounds in 2020. It was actually 154,000 votes. So if you rerun 2020, we're not going to rerun 2020. I don't think we are. But if your turnout levels for both sides are roughly the same, if you want to argue it that way, or at least enter the conversation that way, Harris can quote unquote afford to lose some votes. But that's a risky bet. And so she's trying as much as she can to make up some ground here. But you just hear it from these, especially the Arab American young students, that they can't do it. So they're either going to stay home or vote third party, a lot of them. She has 4 weeks to still try to convince them, but it doesn't look like the situation in the Middle East is going to get any better. In fact, it may keep getting worse. And that is not, that's a horrible humanitarian issue for the whole world. But politically, it's also a bad issue for Harris.
Domestically, I think the biggest story right now is the second hurricane to hit Florida. Obviously, following Helene, there is Milton. Almost every day, John, before the show starts, I turn to Marjorie and I say, are Trump voters going to forgive this? And Marjorie's response usually is, they don't believe that it is what you say it is, Jim. We were talking this morning about his trashing of FEMA, the Biden administration saying the response is horrible. And I think we talked to you last week, before he'd even said that the president hadn't called the governor of Georgia, a Republican and Trump supporter, was thanking President Biden. The governor, a Republican of South Carolina, said FEMA and the federal response has been superb. And yet, obviously, Trump sees an opening here. Will how Trump handles this versus the hands-on approach of the Biden-Harris administration have any impact, or is it yet another nothing impacts anything in this race?
It's a great question. And even the Republican governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who has not wanted to talk to the vice president, he says she's trying to politicize it by getting involved, and she's not normally involved in these things, and I'll let them to fight that out. But Governor DeSantis said of President Biden that the communication with the White House and with the Biden administration is fine. And everything's working as it's supposed to work. That's Ron DeSantis. No fan of Joe Biden. So look, this sometimes you have to be careful in what you say. Trump is lying here. He's just flat out lying. And he's lying every day, and he's lying repeatedly. And so, as that is pointed out by major news organizations, does it hurt him? Maybe with the small slice of independent Nikki Haley voters. We talk about them every week. People who are inclined to vote Republican but don't like Trump, maybe it hurts them there. But I think what you see in the strategy in the end of the campaign is that Trump understands that his strategy is to gin up his base. So whether it's the mass deportations, they're eating dogs and cats, even bringing immigration into this hurricane, it's a lie. That they're taking money that's supposed to go to, FEMA supplies and they're spending it on migrants. It is a flat out lie. But it's all about ginning up his base. That is the strategy. And I'll tell you, yes, it's not fact-based, but there are a lot of Democratic pollsters who look at minor tweaks in the people who identify themselves as likely voters who think there's actually something working in there.
Yeah, we get a lot of texts. We were talking earlier today about the hurricane situation and Project 2025, and part of Project 2025 talks about dramatically weakening FEMA, privatizing the NOAA that keeps track of the weather, putting the weather information behind a paywall, all these things that they were doing. And I got a lot of texts from people saying, Trump says he's got nothing to do with Project 2025. You are lying. And Trump does say that, but it seems to me he does have an association because people who work for him are putting this thing together. So what is the deal with Trump and Project 2025?
Well, he is correct when he says he has no official role with it. It is also true that if you go through the roster of dozens and dozens and dozens, and I say dozens plural 3 times on purpose because there are so many people involved, if you go through the number of people involved, many of them worked for Trump in the last administration. Many of them are people who have helped him in other ways. Many of them are people who say that the former president wants them to work on plans for a second administration. And so what Trump has said is he's not part of it. He's also said he disagrees with some of it. It would be nice if we had another debate so that people could go line by line, or at least big issue through, and get him on the record about some specific things, including the role of the federal government in disaster relief and what you can privatize and what you can't. But we're not going to get that debate. If people lash back saying, well, he's not directly involved, that part's true. But just go online and find the list of people who are, and then look at the Trump administration personnel roster, and you'll see why people are saying that that's kind of a shell game. These are people who have Donald Trump's ear who are writing that book.
So, John King, let's talk about...
By the way, before you leave that, I was just checking to make sure I'm right. There's also the secret recording of the guy who was head of Project 2025,
yes,
in which he says Trump blessed the project and is, quote, very supportive of what we do. I mean, that's...
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think people, as you just said, John, as if we talk about all the time, I think people hear the former president say these things, and they believe him. And they believe at least part of it. And so let's talk a little bit about Elon Musk, who's been on who's jumping around the stage, and people kind of poke fun at him, literally jumping around the stage when Trump was at a rally in Butler. How much does Elon Musk support, given his massive multi-million following on X, or formerly Twitter? How much does he matter?
It's an excellent question, because one of the things he was jumping up and down about was saying that, if the Democrats win the election, if Kamala Harris wins the election, it could be our last election. I find that a little rich, that the team that tried to steal the last election is somehow saying that the Democrats are the threat to democracy. Rich is a polite word. But he is giving money to Trump. He does have a giant social media platform that is now, just go on X. I try not to, but I have to read it sometimes for information purposes. It's a cesspool of negativity. And he keeps himself, Elon Musk, posting things that are flat out not true, that are lies about Harris, about Biden, and about Trump. And so it certainly helps in the Trump ecosphere, rally the base. How far outside of that base? That's an open question. I think sometimes people get too caught up in Twitter or X, in the sense that, a majority of Americans are not on X. But in a very close election, where the key factor for Trump is excite, motivate, and turn out your base, Musk is helping him without a doubt. And Trump has said he'd have some role in the administration, probably a big role.
So, John King, there's a story on the front page of the Times. I don't know if it's in the hard copy, but it's on the website. Trump has an edge with these 13 undecided voters. I call them allegedly undecided voters. That's not what they say. One issue is tripping him up. And the issue tripping him up is the issue that Mike Johnson couldn't deal with, the speaker, J.D. Vance couldn't deal with in the final question of the debate, and Trump obviously will never deal with, namely that he can't admit he lost the election last time. I was sort of surprised, because generally the things that, to me at least, that most embody who Trump is are perfectly fine with his supporters, and there's nothing more central to Donald Trump than that the election was stolen in 2020. Are you surprised by how much this mattered to these 13 undecided voters in this survey?
Well, one would hope that, take the names aside, whenever we're having an election, whether it's for sheriff or mayor or governor or dog catcher or president of the United States, that we should take pride that we live in a country that has free and fair elections. And for a president to try to keep power after losing a free and fair election, and after exhausting all of his legal challenges, the right way to do it, if you think you've been wrong, to challenge it all the way up to his Supreme Court and federal judges, many of whom appointed by Trump, still tried to steal the election, still tried to stay in power. Disrespected the fundamental tenet of the United States of America. So it doesn't surprise me that it concerns voters. It is interesting when you meet voters who say, yeah, that concerns me, but I want the border closed and I want my taxes cut, so I still might vote for them. I think that's what makes this election so, in some ways, confusing and confounding, because there will be people who sharply criticize Trump on those issues, but then say, I might vote for him.
So there are 4 weeks to go. What is, putting aside a potential October surprise, John King, what's going to determine who wins? I was going to say on November 5th or November 6th or 7th or whenever. What's going to determine the outcome of this virtual dead heat?
It is just with a voter in my black voter group here in Milwaukee, who said it's going to be a photo finish, and it's hard to argue with him based on what you're hearing on the street. What is going to determine the income? This is a cliche, but the composition of the electorate, who votes, We've had higher turnout in 2016 than again in 2020. Are we going to have a higher turnout election, or are people going to stay home? So who votes? And not just how many people vote, but who? Does the vice president get the African-American turnout she needs? One of the striking things we see here in Milwaukee is she's in much better shape than Joe Biden was when we were here before. Much better shape. However, you still see a small slice of African-American men who say either she's a woman, so she's not strong enough on the world stage, or it was Donald Trump who signed those stimulus checks back during COVID, or the pre-COVID economy. My rent was lower, grocery prices were lower. So again, back same as the Palestinian conversation, how much are you losing from what was your traditional base, and how much are you gaining because you see enthusiasm among black women is off the charts. And so trying to figure that math out, Jim, is it's my job. And I'll tell you, it is really hard to figure it out right now because you see cracks in the coalition here, but bonuses here. Trouble with organized labor here, but a plus over here. I think she has 4 weeks. One of the things that is still a problem for her is what are you going to do about the cost of living? Because yes, the economic numbers are better of late, but people's legs are tired. They've dipped into their savings to get by. They haven't taken vacations. They wanted to buy a new car, but they can't take on that loan. That's the last 5 or 6 years of people's lives. And so can you convince them? And they think of, again, they have economists can recoil, Democrats can recoil. They have a nostalgic memory of the pre-COVID Trump economy. He inherited a great one from Obama. His tax cuts probably did juice it up a little bit. They also exploded the deficit. But people have that memory that, my rent was lower, my mortgage was lower, or I could buy a house in those days. My groceries were lower. And they're willing to block out the other stuff about Trump and get that back. She has to, every piece of data I see and almost every voter I talk to would like to hear more from her on that. How will you make my life better? And the immigration issue is also working for Trump to gin up his base and to improve his numbers in the suburbs a little bit. The question is a little bit enough?
John King, we have all talked, and you just mentioned it again, it's going to be a photo finish, very close race. So I'm wondering what happens when the election actually does happen. Are we looking at, 4 in the morning? Are we looking at maybe 2 days later? Are we, what do we think? You could be pumping that espresso, for 72 hours to get through the election night and afterwards.
Yeah, 2 things. Number one, it's a photo finish now. That doesn't mean it will break. And it also, that's looking at all the polling data we see. And I know the pollsters, I'm not criticizing the pollsters. I know these people, I know a lot of them, and they try their hardest to deal with changing times and changing technology and changing voter attitudes about participating. The polls tell us, and anecdotally in my travels tell us, we have a very, very close election. That doesn't mean something doesn't break. It doesn't take an October surprise. It just, people could just, a lot of people don't, they're busy. They're busy and their lives are stressful. And the people who, there's about 20% who say they could change their mind. So we have to watch those people. But to your point about the end, we will not know on Tuesday night. We will not know on Tuesday night. And we need to prepare people for that because of the possibility, just like in 2020, somebody might come out on Tuesday night and say he won the election, stop the count. He will not have won the election and we will not stop the count. If that happens, I hope it doesn't happen. Last cycle, it was Saturday, around noontime, at 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday when we finally projected the election for Joe Biden in 2020. Everything I have looked at in consultation with our fantastic political team and decision desk team tells me it'll be at least Thursday, and it could go to Friday this time. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe they break. If a state's 4 points, not 1 point, then you're able to project sooner. But everything we look at today says we're going to go at least late into Wednesday, and I suspect into Thursday and possibly Friday. I don't rule out Saturday again.
Which means you'll be doing the show from the ER on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And what about the machinations that you hear about in terms of, mail-in ballots and who's not voting and IDs for people that do vote, all this kind of effort that's going on at these at the state level?
I think we're going to see a lot of lawyers involved here. That's one of my questions that I can't answer today, that I hope to have a better answer for you as we get closer to the election. Right now, I'm focusing on voters and traveling. But so last time we know how it played out. And there were some challenges. Most of the challenges were filed after the count. But are we going to see this time, like Democrats, for example, who don't like some of the changes at the state level? Are they going to challenge during the count, right? Are they seeking injunctions during the process? I don't know the answer to that question. They are prepared to do that if they see something that they think is out of line or that is questionable. So I do think we know there will be legal challenges after this election. We know that. We've just, there were in 2016, there were a ton in 2020, most of them from Trump. He lost them all. So I think we have to prepare for that. The question is, did the lawyers learn anything from 2020 that changes their strategy that might actually extend the count some? If you got a stay, for example, if you went into court and had a judge stop the count for a day or two to explore legal issues, right? There's nothing wrong with that. If the judge sees an issue he or she thinks is worth exploring, that's the process. That's how it works. Could that possibly slow the count somewhere in a county or in a state? It's a hypothetical, but it's possible. That's something we didn't see in 2020, at least on any wide scale. And so I just think you have to have an open mind that in this highly litigious, I would argue overly paranoid environment, because I trust the people who count votes across America, that we should just be prepared for delays and surprises.
So, John, before we get to the most important issue today is whether you've given up on the Patriots, I'm watching CNN at the same time that we're talking to CNN's chief national correspondent, and to prove that I am maybe one of the worst political prognosticators in America, I was saying to a friend just last night that I think one of the things Harris is going to do at a high-profile event or a high-profile interview, shouldn't do it on the 60 Minutes thing last night, is paint a dramatic difference with Biden on something where the voters are unhappy with Biden. Well, CNN was just playing a part of her interview in The View this morning, and she's asked about where she parts ways with Joe Biden, and her answer was on not a thing that comes to mind. I'm sort of stunned. I understand being respectful to the man who picked you, who I hope she has great respect for, not just for the selection. To me, that is a really bad piece of judgment on the part of a candidate, knowing that there's so many people, rightly or wrongly, that are unhappy with the Biden legacy.
I go out of my way to make sure I'm not taking sides, right? So you can call it a little differently than I do. I do think that you raise an interesting point. That is certainly a choice on her part. And she should know going into any interview that she's going to get questions like this. And so what is the choice? One other answer could be that every day we look at what we did yesterday, and nobody's perfect. And there are some things we would do differently. That doesn't mean we didn't make the best decision we thought at the time. But there are different ways to answer that question, I think, to create even a little bit of that space. But assuming that that's the answer she wanted to give, that nothing I can think of, I will go back to the same conversation I had about Trump, in the sense that, before you can win the tiny middle of the electorate, right, debate for those small percentage of undecided or moderate or truly independent voters, you got to turn out your base. And so it could just well be a calculation that breaking with Joe Biden might hurt more than it helps.
Well, I also thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the big complaint about Joe Biden was that he was too old. I don't know that everybody was that opposed.
Oh, he had very low approval numbers. I don't think solely because of his age, but because
I thought that was the big issue, is that he was too old.
I would agree with Marjorie in the sense, but I would just add the visibility thing. How many times have I told you guys on Tuesdays in my travels that people say, "Where's the president?"
Yeah.
And that's an extension of him being old.
Yeah.
Of them not putting him out there and stuff, and not promoting his own accomplishments. Here in Milwaukee, when we were here the first time a year ago, and then we started to see them when we were here for the Republican convention, there are these giant projects here that are being funded by the Infrastructure Act and other Biden initiatives that he got through a very divided, big accomplishments, whether you agree or disagree. The fact that he was able to get them through in this closely divided government are big deals. A year ago, there were no signs. Now, bridges being fixed, there's a sign, Joe Biden's infrastructure project. Yeah. There's road work being done here, Joe Biden's infrastructure project. So maybe belatedly, but they finally figured out that if you're doing something, put a sign up, take some credit for it.
Hey, John, before you go, I had moved to New York, I think just the year that the Mets came into existence. And until a week ago, they had the worst record of any team in Major League Baseball. But I have to say, living in New York, the horrible Mets were huge fun. And I think everybody who lived in New York then would agree. The horrible Patriots are not fun at all.
No.
So how hard is this for you, Dorchester boy, to live through 1-4 with more to come?
I remember the Steve Grogan, Sam Cunningham, John Hanna days. And a lot of those were tough years, but they were kind of fun because that was a blue-collar, gritty team, and you knew at least they were trying every week. This team, I think the better answer to that question will come next year. Are they really treating this as a learning and rebuilding year? Are they going to learn the lessons from it, or is this what we got for a while? And when do they put the kid quarterback out there? I get it. Offensive line's not that great. You don't want to get him beat up. But what you're putting out there every day is not a great product. And you suffer from that. You suffer from that eventually. I keep saying to my son, like, maybe we'll find a way to get up for a game, and then I keep thinking, do we really want to do that? So it's a bad product at the moment. But as you guys know, for years of me, I'm an optimist. You get knocked down. The challenge is, how do you get back up? So they have some work to do there.
By the way, I only saw this little piece on CNN. A texter says later in the interview with The View, and we'll check this out before 2 o'clock, she did identify a difference with Biden. So we'll see what happens. Great. John, wonderful to see you. We're dying to see your work out of Wisconsin, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Be well.
You.
Love the all over the map. It's really
great series.
It's really enlightening, and I've often said, like I said before, I'm often shocked at what people say. Anyway,
Jamie, you'll check to see what the difference was. Great.
Yeah,
we'll let you know in a few minutes.
We have our texters, that keep us honest, Jim.
It's good somebody's paying attention.
Exactly. We've been speaking with CNN Chief National Correspondent John King, the man behind the All Over the Map reporting project, where he goes around and talks to all these people about what they think about the candidates, whom they're supporting, and why they're supporting them.
And he respects them, too.
Very respectful. And like I said, they look like very normal people. And then you hear them start talking about space lasers, and you think, wow.
Well, speaking of wow, why don't you explain what we're going to talk about next, Margie, which was your idea. Go ahead.
This is going to be an ode. This is going to be an ode to vegetables, Jim.
Okay, fine.
To the lowly rutabaga. It's about roasting vegetables, because you know why? It's root vegetable season, and potatoes have never tasted better. We want to talk about people's relationship to vegetables. I have a long and very serious, close relationship with many vegetables, and we'll talk about those up next. You can call or text at 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library, and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, gun advocates in the state have filed lawsuits against the new gun reform legislation. Local residents are weighing in on the closing of another Steward healthcare facility. Norwood Hospital in Foxborough is set to close its doors by November 5th. And as the FBI reports that anti-Semitic hate crimes have been growing in America, 2 Jewish lawmakers reflect on what can be done. Those stories and more starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Willow Hill School on a 26-acre state-of-the-art campus in Sudbury, offering 6th through 12th graders embedded social, pragmatic, and executive functioning support in all classes and a range of extracurriculars. willowhillschool.org. And The Trustees, presenting Roots and Resilience. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan lead a conversation about a greener, more resilient Boston, October 17th at 6 at High Street Place. Learn more at thetrustees.org/roots.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Every single day next week at 11, we will have both sides from the 5 ballot questions. We'll do debates. Following the debates, you will have 30-plus minutes to call in and either ask questions or give us your point of view. Attorney General with us for an hour on Tuesday, the governor with us for an hour on Wednesday, and Sunita Williams will Zoom in live on Wednesday at 11:40 here at the library from the International Space Station. So it's been a fairly politically heavy show, so we wanted to give Marjorie the opportunity to let off some steam. We were planning what to discuss.
I steamed them as well, Jim.
That was intentional, by the way. Thank you, Marjorie. When we were planning what to discuss with you all this morning at our pre-show meeting, she went on something of, let's call it a tuber tangent, an onion oration, a sweet potato soliloquy. She even talked about a bad beet experience she had in college.
Yes.
Basically, Marjorie has something to say about the humble yet delicious vegetable. And we didn't want to deprive her or you of the opportunity of joining on the conversation she subjected us to all morning. So give us a buzz, 877-301-8970. A lot of angles here. Roasted vegetables are in at Marjorie's house. According to her, they're an instant crowd pleaser at dinner parties. Crowd pleaser. I heard you. Even if you're not the most skilled chef. That would be you, correct?
Not.
Right. The vegetables and you. What are you roasting and eating this season? What's your relationship with vegetables this season? And are you one of those people who believes a supplement, pill, or a powdered vegetable thing is
From
as good
Starbucks.
as the real thing. Call or text us. We don't really know what the question is, but call us anyway. 877-301-8970. Oops, before we start, the texter was right. Later in the show on The View, when Kamala Harris was on today, she says, you asked me what is the difference between Joe Biden and me. That will be one of the differences. I'm going to have a Republican in the cabinet. Okay.
Okay. All right.
All right. That is the difference. There you go. 877-301-8970. And by the way, if you want to, at this morning's meeting, and I was pretending to be interested, I did get excited when I started talking about broccoli. Because, as you know, I think, without a close second, broccoli is my favorite vegetable. Though I would say, Marjorie, when I have done one of those trays that you do, roasted vegetables in the oven, the broccoli sort of loses its je ne sais quoi. Do you know?
No, it does not.
It gets light and loses its excitement.
No, they should get, if you're not doing it right.
What am I doing? I'll hold it up.
Marjorie's
holding up a picture for nobody, by the way.
Yeah,
yes, you are.
Yeah, there it is. The
good.
broccoli should be singed at the end. You should get have a little crust on it at the end if you're doing it the right way. Listen, I am not a very good cook, but I
didn't know that.
Perfected my roasted vegetables. People know it's really easy. You just chop up whatever vegetables you want. You throw them on a tray. A cookie sheet is what I use.
Yeah, I understand that.
Put them in at 425 or 450 with olive oil, salt, and pepper, and it is unbelievable. They cook in 20 minutes, and they last all week long. So you can do a big thing of roasted vegetables on Sunday, and they will last you.
You're not a vegetarian, we should say, correct?
I'm not a vegetarian.
Okay, so the question...
But they're great. You can do broccoli, you can do cauliflower. Those are the top
ones. Onions are the best. Red onions.
Red onions. Well, you have to do red onions with roasted vegetables, absolutely. And all sorts of other things. You know what are great? Sweet potatoes are great. They're great.
No, they take 3 times as long as all the other vegetables.
Well, you have to cut them a little bit thinner.
Oh, you
then
do?
You don't have that problem.
Okay.
Roasted potatoes are great. I mean, there's nothing better than a roasted potato. Red potato, roasted potato.
Little seasoning.
So I think I am very excited about it because, they're good for you, Jim. So,
Marjorie, we've been doing this 25 years.
We have.
And when we have any discussion about
I have brought you in my roasted Brussels sprouts, and you told me you thought they were fantastic.
My fingers were crossed when I said that. No, they weren't. And they were actually quite good. As I started to say for 25 years, whenever we discuss with our coworkers a question we're going to put out for the viewers, listeners, there's something that's important, that there be a question. So in light of the fact this was inspired by you, what exactly is the question that you would like our listeners to respond to, Marjorie, about vegetables?
What is your relationship
with the vegetables?
With vegetables. That's right. I'm getting some kind of innuendos here, which we should not mention.
Don't read those.
I'm not.
No, read them, actually.
We're not talking about any kind of
inappropriate
relationship with any vegetables.
Like a carrot.
We're talking about an up-and-up thing.
Okay, I shouldn't have said that.
You and your turnips. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Turnip is like a carrot except white. Is that what a turnip is?
Turnips, if you're Irish, the turnips used to always be in the corned beef and cabbage. Corned beef, cabbage, turnips, potatoes, and of course carrots, which are very cheap to buy at the store. Mike from Woodstock, what is your relationship with the lowly vegetable, Mike?
Well, this is interesting. I usually call in for Who's the Able. This is an informative call.
Okay.
There's something called purslane. It's also known as pinkweed, and people consider it a weed.
Purslane?
But it's purslane. P-U-R-S-L-A-N-E.
Okay, good.
And it's super high in antioxidants, minerals, and the vegetable highest in omega-3 fatty acids.
Mike, this is a tough connection.
Well, the good news is we have a bad connection.
Yeah, we can't really hear you very well, Mike. I'm sorry.
Very sad. Now, can I read about purslane?
Mitch in New Bedford. Hear what he said?
Yeah, read that, and then I'll tell you about purslane.
Thank you very much, Mitch in New Bedford. That you were inspired by me with all this talk about vegetables.
Yeah.
So Mitch went out and he ordered large French fries
with lunch.
With his lunch.
Have you ever heard of purslane before?
No, I've not.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
It is a low-growing plant with succulent leaves.
Succulent leaves.
I said that. It is considered quite nutritious because it is unusually high. I think he said that'd be a bad connection in omega-3 fatty acids. So that's the purslane. How many people in the audience have heard of a purslane? That's not true. Have you really heard of a purslane? I don't think so.
Okay.
In any case, she seems sincere, but I'm not buying it.
We have a text here from Southborough, Mass. I have to check this out. It says, the New York Times recipe for roasted vegetable ratatouille will change your life.
Yeah.
I'm going to go home and get that immediately.
Write that down, will you?
I subscribe to the New York Times on Sundays, and if you do that, you get to get the cooking section
I'm
and all
aware
the
of that.
games, everything else for free. And then you get all these great recipes every week, and then you can save them to your list.
I've never seen you this quite excited, actually.
Well, I'm into vegetables, Jim. I think there's no question about it.
So do you do anything? I'm sorry to pry, but other than the roasted tray of vegetables, is there anything else you can, any other way you know how to prepare? You don't, right? A vegetable? You have no idea.
I have a small repertoire. I have the roasted vegetables and tuna fish. that's out of
And
a
you do
can.
make the best tuna fish like in history.
That's right. You have to dry it out. That's the
Look
key
at this
thing.
anonymous texter. Roasted sugar pumpkins are tonight's dinner.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Wow, I've never tried roasted pumpkins. Have you?
I actually have.
Yeah, butternut
in some
squash.
Asian restaurants,
It's
I
orange,
have. Yeah.
as close as I get.
Do you know what hot pot is? You ever gone to hot pot?
I've seen the stores.
Hot pot. It's not a store. It's a restaurant.
I've seen the restaurants.
Whatever. And you have a broth where you submerge.
I am home with my vegetables.
You submerge meat, and you know what else you submerge into the liquid?
Vegetables.
Vegetables.
Well,
and
then
one of them is the pumpkin.
I got to get there then.
Okay, please do.
Joanne from Dorchester. What do you think, Joanne?
Hey, Joanne.
Well, first of all, I think you guys are great. But second of all, Marjorie, I'm shocked because you talked about the olive oil, pepper, and salt. You didn't say anything about the garlic.
You are so right, Joanne.
You can do it with garlic too. Well, you don't always have to. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. But how do you roast your garlic, Joanne? Do you do the whole right in the little container? What do you call the garlic container?
It depends. It depends on how lazy I am. Sometimes I just put the cloves on and roast them just like they're other vegetables.
I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
Throw a bunch of cloves around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you just peel the damn thing after it's cooked. Yeah, go ahead.
You can chop them up and scatter them around if you want it to be a little more, chopped. But that's more work. The other thing I wanted to say is that for those of us with a sweet tooth, then the roasted vegetables are especially good if we're trying to not have too much sugar, but we want to eat something sweet because the roasting breaks down the starches in the vegetables and makes them sweeter.
No.
That's right.
What do you mean? Yes,
Yeah,
that's
sweeter
right.
and crunchier.
You have no idea. Did you really know that?
Caramelized. Caramelized. Like caramelized onions.
Really? Joanne,
Yeah.
that was a spectacular call, and you added a lot to the discussion.
You know,
Thank
sometimes
you.
you go to restaurants and they have that big thing of garlic on the table with about 20 little pieces of garlic, and you squish them out.
It's called
you put
cloves.
Them on,
They're called cloves.
and you put them on
You smush them on your stuff.
bread with butter.
Yeah.
One time I ate so much bread and butter and garlic that
Really?
it was coming out of my skin.
That's great.
For days.
Wow, that's a great story.
I smelled really bad.
Now, Marjorie, one of the teases you gave, I wasn't going to agree to doing this segment, but obviously the response is exactly what you expected. But the thing that turned it for all of us, I think I speak for Zoe and Jamie too, all of us were skeptics. When you said, if we do this segment, I will tell you about the bad beat experience.
It's not that funny.
I didn't say it was funny. What was it?
It's just when I was in college, of course, in California, where else?
Yeah.
I took a course called Altered States of Consciousness.
Oh, that's a shock.
Yes. And for my
Is that
Altered
true or
States
is that
of
not true?
Consciousness project, we had to do a project,
Yeah.
and this guy that I used to know, J.D. Head from
Used to
Austin,
know.
Texas, surfer boy with puka shells, blonde hair. We went to an ashram for the weekend.
Of course you did.
But I think that they were
His name was J.D. Head?
J.D. Head.
Okay.
Yeah, John David Head from Austin, Texas.
Good so far.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I think that what they really wanted
What?
was some gardening to get done by a bunch
Sure
of
they
these college students, because all they gave us to eat all weekend was some variation of beets.
Oh.
Beet tea, beet salad dressing.
It's an excellent story.
It was horrible.
Horrible.
They wouldn't even let me have a banana because that was going to ruin the
You
whole
asked for a
thing.
banana?
Then I found out that the head guy was
J.D.
from...
Head.
No, not that guy. The guy that
Really?
ran the ashram, the Kundalini yogi, was from Worcester.
Oh, that ruins
And
everything.
it just, because I'm from Fall River and he's from Worcester, and all they wanted us to do was eat beets and weed the garden. So I was suspicious.
Oh, wow.
We went to International House of Pancakes. at 2
No, is
o'clock
that
in the morning
true?
And had pigs and blankets.
Did
yes.
you really?
Yes, we did.
That's a
Robert
great end
from
to the
Eastford,
story.
Connecticut. Thank you, Robert, for calling.
Hi, Robert.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you?
How you doing? You guys
I think
got
we're
a
okay.
great show there.
We do.
Thank
It's
you.
true. Go ahead.
I found it by accident about 6 months ago, and I think it's great.
What were we talking? Oh, the
You do a
show?
wonderful job.
What were you listening to? Wait a second. What were you
I'm
listening
talking
to
about
before?
vegetables.
He's talking
Robert,
about
no, I don't care
vegetables.
about vegetables.
I
What were you
do.
listening to before you found us?
Oh, nothing probably. Just
Yeah,
some
exactly.
stupid station.
Okay,
so
let's
Robert,
get
tell
back to
us about
vegetables.
You provide a lot of information.
We do.
We do.
You're very educative.
Well, one of us is.
Especially
yeah,
about
it's true.
vegetables. Do you have a feeling for
Where
red
are you on
peppers?
vegetables?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Do you have any thoughts
Yeah,
on
my
vegetables?
wife was a nutritionist at UConn
Oh.
for 48 years.
Wow.
Wow.
And by her
Account.
by her account and her providing me good vegetables, I lost 100 pounds.
No.
100 pounds?
Yeah, I was 365.
We don't really need to know
And,
that, but go ahead,
now
Rob.
I'm down. Now I'm down at 242.
Wow, that's more than 100.
Wow.
Yeah, she did a great job.
She's a hell of a something. Yep.
We got away from roasts.
Sure.
And 'cause I used to consume the roast.
Yeah, a whole roast. That's a problem.
Yeah, that's not as good for you as the vegetables.
Okay.
Well,
so
Robert,
is that it,
thank
Robert?
you for the kind words.
Thank you.
I'm glad you've tuned in.
Did you ever eat a whole roast for dinner before you started doing vegetables?
You know, a lot of people talk about air frying. They're air
Robert,
frying.
thank you.
Lucy in Worcester says, I'm sorry if I said that about Worcester. Worcester is a nice town now. It used to be a little tougher when I was a kid. And I come from Fall River, which is also a tough place.
What's the nice part that you like the most now?
Of Worcester?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
what do you like?
You drive through the rolling hills
then you
of
leave
Worcester
it behind?
with the big houses. The Worcester Centrum is up there. That's very nice. But the houses are beautiful up there.
When was the last time you were at the Worcester Centrum?
I think about 15 years ago.
Okay, fine. But that was really.
I think I saw
we went to see a Bruce
Miley
Springsteen.
Cyrus.
We went to see a Bruce Springsteen concert.
We did.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago too.
That was a long time ago.
Anyway, who's talking about? Oh, the buffalo air fryer buffalo cauliflower. This is from Lucy in Worcester.
Okay.
Cream cheese stuffed jalapenos on the grill and roasted acorn squash with butter and maple syrup.
Wow. Do you have an air fryer?
I do not. Well, actually, I do because I got one of those induction ovens.
Either don't
down
or I
at my
do.
sister's house down the Cape, but I haven't used it yet.
Do you have any idea how to use it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go to Kathy in Concord. We are incredibly enough talking about your relationship with the vegetable. That was Marjorie's idea. Apparently, there are a lot of people interested in this. Go ahead.
That's right. Hi, Kathy.
Hi. I'm a first-time caller.
Oh, thank you.
And I love your show.
Thank you for that, too. What's up?
So I'm calling to tell you how you have changed my life and my relationship to vegetables.
Oh, wow.
I think she's talking about you, but go ahead.
So a couple of years ago on your show, I heard somebody say that you could reduce your carbon footprint by 50% by going vegan. And my first thought was, well, I'm not going to do that. And then my second thought was, I could do better. So my husband and I eat vegan about 3 nights a week.
Good for you. Good for you.
We love it. Yeah.
Okay, do you have any favorite vegetables you want to tell us about, Kathy?
So, mostly things from my garden. I have a community garden plot. Or from a farm share that I get. But something I love to make is vegetable tagine.
Vegetable
with a lot of root vegetables.
Yeah, what is that?
Vegetable tagine.
Yeah.
Like usually tagine is Moroccan and it's meat.
I've had that. Yeah.
This is the vegetable version.
Wow.
How do you spell tagine?
Tagine. Tangine, or is there no N in there in the beginning? Tagine?
I think there's no N.
Okay. Hey, Kathy, I know vegetarians or vegans get upset when I ask this question, but it is what it is. Do you feel deprived, or are you gotten past that phase?
Oh, no. No, it makes that hamburger once a month taste extra good.
Oh, wow. I'd like to be there for that. Kathy, thank you for the call. Now, let me just say, Marjorie allegedly has an expertise.
Well, I don't really have an expertise.
in vegetables. So when I said to her, when you mentioned the turnip, for example, I said that's like a long white carrot. And you actually said yes. And we have somebody who I think you'd agree is a fairly good cook who just texted me.
Yep.
You ever heard of Tiffany Faison?
Yes.
Okay. Tiffany, who owns lots of great restaurants and wins in and out, Tiffany texts to say, with some emojis that I will not mention, carrots that look white are parsnips. They are not turnips. Can you write that down, please?
I think
Tiffany, thank you. It's great to hear from you.
They have a different shape.
Yeah, like a carrot.
No, the parsnips are like a carrot.
I just said that, but a turnip looks like sort of like an onion.
Yeah,
like an onion or a radish.
Yep.
Kind of thing. So you didn't
parsnips.
know. What do you say? You got it wrong.
Well, no, I just didn't correct you, Jim.
Oh.
Sometimes, you may correct me, but I don't always correct you.
Okay. Well, because there's a lot less to correct. It's sort of like that when J.D. Vance said, "Why didn't you do any fact checking on or whatever it was?"
Oh, don't you love that?
Do you believe he said that in the debate?
And you know something? We should have this talker. We should be fact checking all the time. We should be fact checking.
I'm with you. Go ahead.
Anyway, Marilyn on the Expressway. Hello,
Hi, Marilyn. Welcome.
Hi. How are you guys?
We're
fine.
Good. Thank
How are you?
Good. I love roasted vegetables.
Me too.
Broccoli and cauliflower.
Yeah.
It's like crack. It's hard to stop eating it.
It is. That's right. You can just stuff yourself.
Hey, Marilyn, while you're here, because Marjorie gets nervous when I ask her these questions. When I roast vegetables, they taste really bland. What do you put on them that gives them a little life? I'm going to try it again tonight.
You have salt and pepper, and you separate them.
I don't use salt. I don't add salt.
Oh, you don't add salt.
No,
okay.
Sorry. Okay, what do you add to your roasted vegetables? Go ahead.
Well, first of all, you have to cut them in uniform size pieces.
Very important.
Well, no, that's not true because some things cook faster than other things.
No, that's where you have to adjust to make.
No.
Oh, go ahead, Marilyn.
No.
Sorry.
And you have to give them space to roast because they give off steam.
Oh.
And you don't want them steamed. You want them crunchy, like Marjorie said
That's
earlier.
right, crunchy.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Oh, this is
so
horrible.
I do salt, pepper, and olive oil, and sometimes
Not
garlic.
you, Marilyn. You're
I
great.
have this great recipe. Thank you.
Okay, now
I
you're
have
doing
this
great.
Great
actually.
recipe for roasted vegetable orzo. So you roast all kinds of vegetables: red pepper, zucchini, eggplant, onions, mushrooms. And then you cook the orzo separately, and you make a little bit of vinaigrette, and oh my God, it's so delicious.
Can I tell you something? You made something dull as dirt sound so interesting because of your investment in the roasted vegetable. That was a spectacular call, Marilyn.
But
Thank you very much.
That is the problem with your roasted vegetables. They're touching each other. They can't be touching.
So they have to be spaced.
Yes,
is that what you're saying?
they have to be
what kind
spaced.
of? Let's assume I put a sweet potato next to a red onion with a little piece of broccoli floret in between. How much spacing should I have?
They just shouldn't be touching each other.
So that's the issue, right?
That is the issue. That's right. And you have to. Sweet potatoes will cook very quickly, so you don't.
No, they don't.
They do. That's why you have to make them. Cut them so that they will cook at the same time as and red onion is key. Red onion is key.
Jamie said this is like an SNL parody of NPR, which it really is horrible.
Oh, listen to this.
Oh, this guy, I'm into what this guy, can we get to, what do you want to say?
This is the texter who says,
well, so go ahead.
I hope my wife's favorite vegetable is me.
Oh,
isn't that touching?
That is pathetic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And this next person is saying, roasted vegetables saved my marriage. My husband would exclusively eat corn, no other cooked vegetable, until he tried my roasted carrots. Now I can roast nearly any vegetable, and he will eat them all up.
Beautiful. David and Roslindale, you're on Boston Public Radio. It's the Vegetable Appreciation Hour. Hello there, David.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm kind of enjoying this.
Well, I'm kind of enjoying it too. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, all my relationships with vegetables have been fictional.
Oh, that's too bad, David.
That's a good line, David.
And the only
it's
way,
a very good line.
The only way I do, I think I have to agree with Jim on this, that the only way I really like them is if there's something on them like cheese or a gratin or
well, that sort of
tempura.
ruins the whole point, though. You would agree, right, David? Thank you.
Yes.
Good. Okay, good. So you were about to say something I was going to agree with. Tell us how you like vegetables other than with cheese on them. Go ahead. You told our call screener.
Tempura.
Yes.
So if I want to have vegetables, I'll go to a Japanese restaurant and get vegetable tempura.
Now, by the way, I love vegetables tempura. I love them. But the problem is it's like having a fried dough vegetable, which sort of undercuts the point. Doesn't it, David, or it does?
Yeah, unless you have some sauces to dip them in. And
yeah.
You know.
I think I do know, yeah. Okay, David, thank you for joining us. So we have to, in a second, talk to Jared, who I bet you eats a lot of vegetables.
I bet he does,
He
too.
probably doesn't know the difference between a turnip and a parsnip either. What did you say is your takeaway? This is a wildly successful segment, thanks to you.
Takeaway is you just can't get enough, Jim, of roasted vegetables. It's a revolutionary way to eat your food. And you know something? Like I said, I'm a terrible cook. Anybody
really
can do it. Just make sure there's space
so it's not
among the vegetables. And
between, not among.
I think it's among.
I think it's between.
Between is between two. If it's more than two, it's
what
among.
if I'm only doing 2 vegetables?
Then it's between. but that wouldn't be very much to eat, 2 little tiny vegetables. Among the vegetables.
Jared,
and make sure you include red onions.
Jared, I don't want to tell you what to do, but if you want to pump the ratings on that culture show, we have hit a gold mine here this afternoon. So feel free to borrow it and run with it.
There's nothing like good vegetable talk.
Do you roast vegetables in your house?
I'm in the studio. I'm watching the ratings meter, and I can't believe.
Woo! There we go.
Kale, it just spiked.
Kale.
I couldn't believe it.
We never mentioned kale.
And how about arugula? Remember Dukakis
he got in trouble in Iowa.
Fun of mentioning arugula because people think it's like a Canterbridge sort of thing, which it is. But anyway.
You're a big vegetable. Are you a big vegetable guy?
Well, I love salads. I
do.
Spend the rest of my life eating salads, including my favorite is arugula, actually, with a little bit of Parmesan cheese and pine nuts.
Fabulous.
It's so fabulous.
Arugula, very high end, very, very
We're going to,
refined.
by the way, just so you know, we just decided, Marty and I wrote notes to each other, we're going to end every show with a half hour on vegetables. We're going to profile a different vegetable every day, and Marjorie's going to talk about roasting it among or between other vegetables.
The lowly eggplant.
No, I hate eggplant.
Oh, I love eggplant.
I'm with you on that.
No,
which one? Who you with? The hater or the lover?
Between you two.
Okay, fine.
I favor not liking the eggplant.
This is like Sweaty Bowls from totally with Alex. What's his name? Okay, what are you doing on the show there?
Baldwin.
So we're going to be starting with artist Steve Locke, who has a new exhibition out at Mass MoCA.
He's incredibly talented.
Yeah. He's such a great man, such a great thinker, such a great artist. We'll be talking to him. And this is great. Edgar B. Horwick III has investigated Dungeon Rock. Do you know about this?
No.
This is the speculated haunted pirate lair in Lynn. So we'll find out if it's truly haunted, because Edgar went there. And then we'll talk about Beasties, a sci-fi rock opera that's about to premiere in Arlington.
Wow. That's going to be, I didn't know about any of that stuff.
Where are you discussing eggplant and that? Where does that fit into today's
You'll
rundown?
have to tune in to find out.
Okay. Jared, it's good to see you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Jared.
Listen to Jared on The Culture Show in 3 minutes.
That's right. Thank you, people that came down to the Boston Public
Thank
Library
you all
today.
for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you all for wherever you are from listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thank you very much. Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or you can check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're going to be back here at the Boston Public Library with media maven Sue O'Connell, GBH's Jared Bowen. You just heard him. The Culture Show, as Jim said, 2 o'clock right after the 2 o'clock news. Boston Globe Love Letters columnist Meredith Goldstein talking about love and relationships. And Chris Browning, host of the Popcorn Finance podcast, going to tell us about what to do with your money. That's assuming you have any money. Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley. Lots of people really don't. We're struggling.
That's a good point.
Anyway, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John LaClaw Parker, our executive producer Jane Bologna. That is our crew. We have a special crew at the Boston Public Library. Maddie Guy, Patrick Lally, Olivia Corcio, and Juan Jose Cadena. And thanks to our host at the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. The Culture Show is on right after the 2 o'clock news here at 89.7 GBH. I'm leaving now to go home and now roast up a big...
No, I actually have a programming note. I had mentioned the governor would be with us next Wednesday. Yep. She has been preempted by a Beans and You segment. Full hour next Wednesday.
Green beans.
1 to 2.
Beans. Can't go
By the way,
wrong
I love green beans.
With the humble
with ground
green
pork, stir fried.